The 10,098 meeting of the Security Council is called to an order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Middle East, including the Palestinian question. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Algeria, Armenia, Australia, Austria, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Cuba, Egypt, Germany, Iceland, India, Indonesia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Malaysia, Maldives, Mexico, Morocco, Namibia, Norway, the Philippines, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, the Syrian Arab Republic, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Tunisia, Turkey, Uganda, United Arab Emirates, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and Vietnam to participate in this meeting. It's so decided. I propose that the Council invite the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in this meeting in accordance with the provisional rules of procedure and the previous practice in this regard. There be no objection. It's so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's provisional rules of procedure, I invite Mr. Ramirez Al-Akbarov, the Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process and United Nations Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, to participate in this meeting. It's so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite the following to participate in this meeting: His Excellency, Mr. Jamie Hermida Castillo, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. His Excellency, Mr. Stavros Lamberdinis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, and His Excellency, Mr. Majid Abdulaziz, Permanent Observer of the Permanent Observer Mission of the League of the Arab States to the United Nations. It's so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of the item 2 of the agenda. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Ramiz Alakbarov.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, Excellencies, I brief you today at the moment of both profound opportunity and considerable risk. In front of us, we see a potential turning point for Gaza, a genuine chance for a better future. But many uncertainties remain. In parallel, we also see a continued unraveling in the occupied West Bank and a region mired in tension. The announced start of the second phase of the President Trump's 20-point plan, comprehensive plan, is a critical step in consolidating the ceasefire in Gaza, alongside the establishment of subsidiary bodies of the Board of Peace, including the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza and the Office of the High Representative for Gaza. I have just returned from Cairo, where I met with the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza to discuss how the United Nations can best support the committee's effort to provide critical public services, facilitate humanitarian aid, and lay the groundwork for reconstruction in Gaza, in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 2803. The task at hand is monumental. It requires full coordination among all stakeholders, taking into account the existing systems and capacities. The United Nations stands ready to support the committee and the Palestinians in Gaza as they start the arduous work of rebuilding. I welcome the recovery of the last hostage in Gaza, and I'm relieved that they have been returned to Israel for burial. I extend my condolences to the family of Rang Gvili. With all hostages returned, I hope that the process of healing for the families of all of those affected may begin. Implementation of the next phase of the comprehensive plan must advance in good faith. I'm encouraged by Israel's announcement on 25th January that Rafah crossing will open to pedestrian movements in both directions. Demilitarization of the Gaza Strip is essential to enable conditions and security arrangements that are urgently required to facilitate the work of the National Committee across the entire Strip. Mr. President, my last visit to Gaza affirmed one truth. The people in Gaza are ready and eager to lead the way to a better, more stable future. Less than 2 weeks ago, amidst enormous misery and pain, I witnessed inspiring resilience and hope. Youths taking their exams and excelling in the most difficult of circumstances. Farmers were unable to import seeds, but still finding ways to plant greenhouses repaired with makeshift materials, and small business owners devising ingenious solutions when faced with scarce materials and a devastated market. Such efforts are being replicated across Gaza. They deserve our support. But nevertheless, nearly the entire population in Gaza remains in need of humanitarian assistance. Heavy rainfall and cold temperatures has exacerbated the suffering of more than 1.5 million displaced Palestinians in Gaza, who had little or no means to seek safe shelter. I heard firsthand how families sat vigil through the night just trying to hold down the four corners of their tents. I saw a little girl carrying heavy stones just to prevent her shelter from blowing away in the wind. I don't know her age, but she looked to me being just 4-year-old. The shelter response has suffered from restrictions for the entry of vital materials and technical expertise. As a result, shelter sites in Gaza do not meet the scale of the needs or international standards. Transitional shelter sites must provide access to much needed essential services. Above all, they must be voluntary and dignified and in line with humanitarian principles. The support of all stakeholders is needed. Mr. President, across all sectors, humanitarian actors are still unable to operate at scale in Gaza. Their work is being hindered by insecurity, custom clearance challenges, the limited number of partners authorized by Israeli authorities to bring cargo into Gaza, delays and denials of cargoes at crossing, and limited routes available for transporting supplies within Gaza. While the Jordan corridor remains a humanitarian lifeline, current volumes entering Gaza through back-to-back arrangements represent only a fraction of what was previously achieved when the direct route was operational. Since 10 October, only 9% of 2720 processed aid has entered Gaza via Jordan. Fully utilizing existing proven regional corridors remains essential to saving lives in Gaza. Entry of mobile homes, rescue equipment, fuel, and medical supplies continues to be severely restricted, endangering the lives of tens of thousands of IDPs and patients. To address this, materials must enter at scale. Access to public infrastructure and agricultural land remains restricted. Meanwhile, regular detonations of residential buildings are continued and repeated population displacements have occurred. On 30th December, Israel announced its plans to suspend the operations of some international NGOs. The government also notified 37 NGOs that their registration would expire at the end of 2025 due to what Israel says is the failure to comply with the new regulations, triggering a 60-day review period. Banning these NGOs will have a significant impact on the humanitarian response across the OPT. I urge Israel to immediately reverse this decision. Despite the ceasefire, the Israeli military continues to conduct military operations with airstrikes, shelling, and gunfire occurring across the street. Armed exchanges also persisted with Palestinian militants. Attacks in the vicinity or beyond of so-called yellow line are happening daily, and hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire began, including many women and children. Civilians must be protected at all times. Amid the obstacles, we also have seen some welcome actions. The continued arrival of aid via Egypt, Jordan, Israel, occupied West Bank, and Cyprus has been critical. This has helped increase the volume of supplies brought into Gaza and led to improvements in nutrition status of the population. But more needs to be done. Mr. President, I would like to devote a reminder of my briefing to addressing the spiraling dynamics in the occupied West Bank. Every month, the United Nations and many others in this Council emphasize the gravity of the unfolding situation. But that has yet to translate into meaningful action on the ground. Negative trends are entrenched daily. The reporting period was marked by continued violence with extensive Israeli military operations, settlement expansion, settler violence, demolition, and large-scale detentions. In late December and early January, Israeli forces conducted intensified raids across Jenin, Nablus, Hebron, and Ramallah, frequently involving live fire and raising serious concerns about the use of lethal force. A 16-year-old boy was shot and killed during a raid in Kabatia on 20th December and after reportedly throwing a brick toward an IDF soldier. And multiple Palestinians were killed or fatally wounded during the operation south of Nablus. There have been large-scale arrest campaigns of Palestinians by Israeli security forces, including children, amidst reports of ill treatment and torture and continued deaths in custody. Palestinian attacks against Israelis have also persisted. On 26 December, a Palestinian man killed 2 Israelis, including a woman, in 2 ramming and stabbing attacks in northern Israel. At the same time, settler violence intensified. In December, repeated settler attacks led to the displacement of the entire community of Hirbet Yanun in Nablus Governorate, and in January we saw the forcible displacement of some 80 households from Ras Ain Auja in Jericho Governorate. Demolitions and large-scale land seizures continued across the north and west bank. Evictions in East Jerusalem's Silvan neighborhood on 4th January and extensive demolitions in Tulkaram Nur Shams refugee camp at the end of December underscore how violence, displacement, and territorial fragmentation are converging on the ground. Meanwhile, settlement expansion has been rapid and relentless. The combination of settlement advancement, state land declarations, and persistent establishment of outposts is carving up and making vast swaths of land inaccessible for Palestinian use in the occupied West Bank. During the reporting period, approximately 1,860 housing units were advanced in the Area C. This includes 120 housing units at Sanur, a settlement that was evacuated in 2005. Additionally, 2,850 housing units were advanced in East Jerusalem. These includes two large-scale plans, a plan for 1,500 housing units in residential towers in a government complex between Sheikh Jarrah and Mount Scopus, and a plan in East Talpiot for 950 housing units in several residential towers. The Israeli government has also published tenders for over 4,770 in Area C, including 3,401 housing units in E1, which, if built, would effectively sever the connection between the northern and southern West Bank. In recent weeks, the pressure campaign against UNRWA has also sharply escalated in an effort to end its operation in the occupied Palestinian territory. On 29 December, the Israeli Knesset passed legislation instructing Israeli authorities to seize UNRWA's compound in Sheikh Jarrah and Kafr Akab, and requiring utilities and financial service providers to deny service to UNRWA or any of its facilities. On 12 January, Israeli forces raided an UNRWA health center in occupied East Jerusalem and ordered it to close. A week later, Israeli forces forcibly entered the UNRWA headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem with bulldozers demolishing the buildings. And officials have made abhorrent calls for the annihilation of UNRWA staff. These acts are flagrant violation of international law and the privileges and immunities of the United Nations. I call on the Israeli government to abide by the October 2025 advisory opinion by the International Court of Justice, which states that Israel is obliged under international law to facilitate UNRWA's operations, not hinder or prevent them. Despite significant increases in international support in 2025, the unilateral withholding by Israel of all Palestinian clearance revenues continues. The Palestinian Authority continues to face the growing fiscal crisis resulting in partial payment of civil servant salaries and a reduction in services. Nearly $2.5 billion of clearance revenues remains withheld by Israel. Mr. President, Israeli government policies have facilitated a number of destructive trends: rapid settlement expansion and its related infrastructure, the creation and legalization of outposts, widespread demolitions and displacements, state land declarations, deepening movement and access restrictions, and expansion of municipal boundaries. Persistent and extreme settlers' violence, frequently accompanied or supported by Israeli security forces, continues to inflame tensions, forcibly displace Palestinians, and exacerbate instability. The consequences have been severe, deepening the occupation, fragmenting Palestinian space, and strengthening territorial contiguity for settlement. And ultimately, these steps are further undermining the prospects for peace and the establishment of a two-state solution. Unless urgently addressed, they may also jeopardize progress on implementing the second phase of the ceasefire agreement. Mr. President, the implementation of the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan is critical and will require our firm and collective commitment. There is a genuine opportunity to lay the foundations for a more stable and secure future for Palestinians and Israelis, and advance the goal of legitimate Palestinian government that reunifies Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and chart a course toward ending the occupation and advancing a political process that will ultimately end the conflict. The UN will continue to support Palestinians and Israelis to end the conflict and to realize a two-state solution in line with previous United Nations resolutions and international law. Mr. President, I thank you and this Council for your attention.
I thank Mr. Alakbarov for his briefings. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to thank you for presiding over this open debate at such a pivotal moment for peace, justice, and human dignity. Allow me also to welcome the ministers who are with us, to thank Mr. Ramiz Al-Akbarov for his briefing, and to welcome again our friends, the 5 elected new members of the Security Council, Bahrain, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Latvia, and Liberia. 80 years after the end of the Second World War, the core principles upon which the United Nations were founded remain as critical as ever. The right of peoples to self-determination, the prohibition on the acquisition of territory by threat or use of force, and the rule of international law as the guarantor of the rights of individuals, regardless of race, religion, or nationality, and of nations, large and small. Those principles are the expression of the wisdom finally acquired by humanity following a devastating war, where peoples around the globe endured and witnessed aggression, genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes on a scale that altered the course of history and led to the founding of these United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to ensure international peace and security. It is these very principles that are at stake and under threat in Palestine. Asserting them there is upholding them everywhere. Abandoning them there is jeopardizing them everywhere. Mr. President, we welcome the ceasefire agreement reached last year under President Trump's plan, and we commend the personal engagement of President Trump and the US administration, as well as the tireless efforts of the mediators who have worked to implement it. We supported the ceasefire in good faith, even in the face of repeated breaches, with at least 500 Palestinians killed since the ceasefire came into effect, with many more wounded and ongoing destruction by the occupying power, and while life-saving assistance, including shelter, continues to be obstructed in the depths of this harsh winter. We support the plan because it offered an immediate path toward ending the killing and suffering, the famine, and unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe inflicted on the Palestinian people in Gaza. While we recognize that thousands of lives have been saved by the ceasefire, these goals are yet to be fully achieved. We welcome the completion of the release of all Israeli hostages and prisoners alive and deceased, including the recovery of the remains of the last Israeli body 2 days ago. We had repeatedly said that only a ceasefire could allow for this to happen. Yet, we must ask, what about the countless Palestinian families whose loved ones have been killed, with thousands of bodies still crushed and buried under rubble, yet to be found, yet to be identified, and to be given dignified burial? What of the families who waited for the return of thousands denied, tortured, humiliated, starved, raped, or missing, raped or missing? What of the entire families obliterated from existence, or the survivors of genocide left with grave injuries and amputations, who will carry the devastation with them for all their lives? What of the trauma and loss of an entire people? The suffering of the Palestinian people, civilian men, women, and children, must be ended with equal urgency. Healing, recovery, and justice are indispensable and a right for all. Full implementation of phase 1 obligations, including an immediate end to the killing and unrestricted humanitarian access across the Gaza Strip, is essential. These are not new demands. They are the repeated calls of this Council and constitute obligations under international law. Moreover, Israel must end its ongoing war against humanitarian actors, including UNRWA and vital NGOs, whose safety and ability to operate have been repeatedly undermined. The destruction of UNRWA facilities, including the seizure and destruction of its headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem, which was also set ablaze, and the targeting of humanitarian personnel, and now the attempt to ban and expel recognized and respected NGOs operating on Palestinian territory, demonstrate total contempt for the very mechanisms established to protect and assist civilians. It is an attack on the United Nations by one of its members in ways we had never witnessed before. The advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on Israel's humanitarian obligations must be fully respected. But instead of compliance, we have witnessed continued obstruction to aid delivery, continued violations of the Charter and Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, and continued grave breaches of international humanitarian law by the occupying power. In this regard, we call the letters of the Secretary General to the Security Council, to you and General Assembly, including that in light of the gravity of the Israeli government's actions, and I quote, a situation may exist in which a difference has arisen between the United Nations and the State of Israel regarding, among other things, the interpretation or application of the General Convention, end of quotation of the letter of the SG. Furthermore, we are obliged to underscore yet again, Israel is not the sovereign in the Palestinian territory. This illegal occupation has no rights whatsoever in occupied Palestine, including in Jerusalem. Mr. President, the ceasefire's permanence and success requires that Israel cease trying to dictate the future of Gaza and to fully withdraw from the territory. Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. I repeat, Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. It belongs to the Palestinian people, nobody else. And any transitional arrangements must fully respect our people's rights and our sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territory. The Gaza Strip must be reunited with the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, without delay. And our people's right to self-determination and independent statehood, enshrined in the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, which I began with, and in numerous resolutions of the Security Council, General Assembly, ICJ rulings, and in peremptory norms of international law cannot be disposed of. Israel has to abandon its plans to forcibly displace and replace our people across occupied Palestine. In the West Bank, Israeli military attacks and settler terrorism continue unabated, systematically driving Palestinians from their homes. Settlements continue to be advanced, all tools of rampant annexation. In this regard, we warn of the dangerous Israeli escalation against Palestinian cities, villages, and refugee camps in the West Bank, including the implementation of the so-called E1 settlement project. This must be stopped. The last families in Ras Ain al-Auja have been forced from their land, leaving no Palestinian presence in what was once a thriving community. This was the largest shepherding community in the southern Jordan Valley and the last to survive Israelis' ethnic cleansing in the area. United Nations reporting has now documented a record level of West Bank displacement in the last 2 years. Around 40,000 Palestinians violently and forcefully transferred from their homes, the highest figure ever since 1967. Despite the long-standing demands by the international community, including the Security Council for decades, for a halt to such illegal colonial practices, Israel persists with its impunity, entrenching its illegal occupation of our land and people every single day. This must be stopped. Mr. President, these events are not isolated. They are part of a sustained pattern that threatens not only the Palestinian people, but the foundational principles of this organization. This cannot be ignored. Yet, we still see a chance for peace. I repeat, yet we still see a chance for peace. A real historical opportunity to end the occupation, to realize Palestinian rights, to achieve just and lasting peace in accordance with international law and UN resolutions. The Palestinian Authority is working in impossible circumstances to uphold its responsibilities. It is working to retrieve the bodies of Palestinians, to restore education, to revive the health sector, to provide shelter and assistance, to reopen the Rafah crossing in both directions, to prepare for recovery and reconstruction. It has persisted in its decision to embark on a peaceful path to freedom and has not deviated from it. It has conducted difficult reforms while being undermined politically and financially. It has adopted the principle of one state, one government, one law, and one weapon. Palestine is a reliable partner for peace, if peace is the objective. Palestine is a reliable partner for peace if peace is the objective. The whole world can testify to that. But the Israeli government's objective is not peace, it is domination. Netanyahu yet again bragged that he will never allow a Palestinian state to emerge. He went further, reaffirming Israel will retain control from the river to the sea, promising eternal occupation, a delusional idea that will continue depriving our region of the prospects and promise of peace. Mr. President, the Palestinian people have an inalienable right to self-determination, including the right to the independence of their state. Any implementation of peace plans must be upheld this right fully and unequivocally, and must preserve the unity and territorial integrity of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. There must be no administrative or legal, or I should rather say illegal, measures that entrench division and occupation instead of bringing an end to them. Mr. President, the best way to consolidate the ceasefire is to move towards a just peace. This requires the mobilization of the international community as a whole, in charting a clear path away from occupation and war towards shared peace, security, and prosperity as foreseen by the New York Declaration and supported overwhelmingly by the member states of these United Nations. We must all work together to advance these noble objectives. We welcomed the launch of phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement and the establishment of transitional bodies to help administer Gaza in the transitional period ahead of reunifying the West Bank and Gaza Strip under the Palestinian Authority as stated by this Council. Palestine must be central to and fully represented in any processes that determines its future. We reiterate our readiness to work with the United States and regional and international partners to ensure respect for the ceasefire agreement in line with international law. Our people are waiting for the recovery and rebuilding promised to them after so much pain and loss inflicted on them. We cannot let them down. Palestine needs a just peace more than any other country because it suffers most in its absence. It is seeking a peaceful path to freedom. We are seeking a peaceful path to freedom. It should be encouraged and supported, not undermined. We want our rights, the rights accorded to all nations, nothing more, but also nothing less and nothing else. I repeat, we want our rights, the rights accorded to all nations, nothing more, but also nothing less and nothing else. Free Palestine, peace in the Middle East, and I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement. I'll now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to thank the briefer and welcome the ministers who joined us today and the new members of the Security Council. Mr. President, from the first day of the war in Gaza, Israel has been clear before this council about its goals. We had two goals: every hostage home, Hamas disarmed. With the return of Ran Gvili, I can finally say that the first goal has been achieved. Every hostage been brought home. What many believed was impossible is now a fact. We said we would bring them home, all of them, no matter how long it took. Now, for the first time since 2014, there is not a single Israeli hostage held in Gaza. This achievement was secured by the brave soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces, young men and women who stepped forward with incredible determination, resolve, and courage. They defended our people. They brought our hostages home. They did so under fire, under pressure, and under relentless scrutiny, including from within this very chamber. Israel owes them a profound debt. The world owes them one as well. This effort was also driven and sustained by the leadership of the United States. The peace framework advanced by President Donald Trump and his administration created a path forward. Today, for the first time in 843 days, I sit in this chamber without the yellow hostage pin on my lapel. Everyone in Israel wore it until yesterday. This is a moment of deep national significance for Israel. This moment also carries a message far beyond Israel. Western liberal democracies do not cave to terrorists. They do not reward mass murder. They do not trade their values for silence. The message is clear for every terrorist organization watching us. Kidnapping civilians does not bring legitimacy. Violence does not deliver political gains. Terror does not win. Israel now advances its second goal with the same determination and clarity. Hamas must be disarmed. The next steps are grounded in phase 2 of the peace plan, supported by Israel, key international players and partners, and this Security Council. Phase 2 is written. It is structured. It provides for the establishment of a responsible governing framework for Gaza. There are positive signs. However, one obstacle remains: Hamas disarmament. The choice now rests with Hamas. Acceptance of full disarmament enables progress. Refusal places full responsibility on Hamas for the consequences. Clarity is essential about what disarmament actually means. Disarmament does not mean staged handovers for cameras. It does not mean weapons hidden underground while promises are made above ground. There is no real disarmament until Hamas's military infrastructure is dismantled. That includes weapons, command centers, and terror tunnels. No economic rebuilding can take place while Hamas remains armed. No civilian future can exist while a terrorist army controls Gaza. A genocidal terrorist organization should not have any weapons. Hamas understands this reality. That is why it delays, that is why it deceives. But don't just take Israel's word for it. Hamas put this in writing. In the final days of last year, Hamas released this manifesto, very impressive one. This document, a copy of which was sent to all of your missions this morning, removes all doubt about Hamas's real intentions. They wrote it. It wasn't us. In this document, it says very clearly, it rejects disarmament. It rejects giving up political power. It denies the atrocities of October 7th. It justifies and glorifies its mass murder. Hamas even boasts about its strategy and diplomacy. In its own words, it calls one of the achievements of October 7th the collapse, and I quote, of Israel's image as a Western democracy. That tells you everything. This is not the language of peace, even when dressed up as diplomacy. It is a roadmap for future violence. Do not fall into Hamas's playbook. Do not let its propaganda write your talking points. Hamas still remains heavily armed. Let me show you the numbers. It still holds thousands of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and tens of thousands of Kalashnikov rifles. In total, Hamas still holds roughly 60,000 assault rifles. These weapons are used not only against us, against Israel, but against Gazans who oppose Hamas rule. This is not a movement preparing for peace. This is a terrorist army preparing for its next war. Israel has fully implemented phase 1 of the agreement. Since the beginning of the October ceasefire, the volume of aid has increased sharply. Let's take a look at the numbers. More than 33,000 trucks have entered Gaza since October 10, 2025. They delivered over 850,000 tons of food, 8,300 tons of medical supplies, more than 420,000 tents. Every week, more than 4,200 trucks enter Gaza. 12 field hospitals are operating today. Israel does not limit UN assistance and has invited agencies to increase daily deliveries. Israel has opened all major crossings into Gaza and earlier this week announced the reopening of the Rafah crossing. Aid is flowing, coordination continues. Mr. President, while attention remains fixed on Gaza, another crisis demands urgency. Iran. The Ayatollah regime is brutally repressing and murdering its own people.
जब दूध से सफेदी निरमा से आए रंगीन कपड़ा भी खिल खिल जाए तो फिर तो क्यों मैल से घबराए
तू भी अपने अंदर की चमक को बढ़ा ले भर के रंग अपने सारे ख्वाब तू सजा ले अपने पक्के इरादों से ही तो जन्मा है तुझसा ही निरमा है
जिद्दी दागों के लिए निर्मा एडवांस।
The Houthis are not fighting over borders. They have no border with us. They have no border with the US. They have no border with most countries here. They are not fighting over land. The flag tells the entire story. Look at the flag of the Houthis. That's what it says in Arabic. Allah Akbar, Al-Maut li-America, Al-Maut li-Israel, Alana al-Yahud, Al-Nasser lil-Islam. In English, God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse on the Jews, victory to Islam. That is the official flag of the Houthis. This is radicalism. It is insanity. That hatred did not originate in Yemen. It was cultivated, funded, and armed by Tehran. The Iranian regime diverted its own people's money to fund terror instead of providing basic needs. This is how the Iranian regime operates. It builds network of violence and exports them across the Middle East and beyond. A regime that massacres its own people cannot be trusted to respect others. The world's most extreme regime must never obtain the world's most dangerous weapon. Israel has no hostility toward the people of Iran. Their courage is undeniable. Their struggle for freedom deserves support. Their future must be free of tyranny. Hope, however, is not a strategy. As Hamas is dismantled, the Iranian regime must be confronted with the same seriousness. The same clarity must apply. The same standards must hold. Israel's position is unmistakable. Every hostage was brought home. Hamas must now be dismantled completely. Gaza must be demilitarized and de-radicalized. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the members of the council. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Sarah Beslow Nyanti, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank the Somali presidency for convening this high-level debate and the briefers for their insightful interventions. Mr. President, Excellencies, the Middle East is not a distant theater of conflict. It is a central test of whether this council can still shape outcomes rather than merely cataloging suffering. In the Middle East, we do not confront one crisis. We face a chain reaction of wars, reprisals, and unresolved grievances, each feeding the next. Liberia's own experience reminds us that silencing guns matters, but peace does not come from silence of the guns alone. It comes from choices made early, deliberately, and sustained over time. Mr. President, for millions in the Middle East, war is not an interruption of life. It is life itself. There are people who are born under bombardment, who learn adulthood under occupation or siege, and who will grow old without ever knowing what it means to live without fear. Entire lives, full lives, have been lived inside conflict from the first breath to the last. And nowhere is this tragedy more unforgivable than in the lives of children. Some babies die while trying to nurse from mothers whose bodies have nothing left to give. They die not from rare diseases or unavoidable fate, but from hunger, blockade, displacement, and decisions made far from their cries. This is not abstract. This is happening in real time. Children are growing up inside the wreckage of our choices. They inherit wars they did not declare, hatreds they did not choose, and borders drawn more fiercely than compassion. They carry the cost of adult power struggles because the international community has too often accepted delay, denial, and turning a blind eye as its policy. While children elsewhere worry about exams, football matches, music, friendships, and what they might become in the future, children in the Middle East learn how to stay safe during explosions and the best route to take to find food. They live in fear, not knowing what it means to be free. This is not only a moral failure, it is a strategic catastrophe that recycles violence, enmity, and hate. Mr. President, Excellencies, the reality of the Middle East is unfortunately grim, but the horizon beckons hope. Liberia notes recent diplomatic efforts aimed at reducing violence and reopening political space in Gaza and across the region. We applaud initiatives led by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, other regional leaders, and other stakeholders, which have helped to create momentum toward de-escalation, improved humanitarian access, and dialogue. Progress, however, is fragile, but progress matters. Let's be clear, this momentum must be sustained. Therefore, Liberia encourages continued engagement with this council and with all stakeholders to deepen the progress, seize every opportunity, and consolidate the gains already made. History shows that diplomatic openings will close inevitably, not because they are imperfect, but because they are abandoned. Mr. President, no conflict has more broadly defined the region than the one between Israel and Palestine. Liberia is concerned by this protracted conflict. We reiterate the urgent need for immediate and sustained escalation and for expanding humanitarian access that is predictable and safe. Liberia continues to support a negotiated two-state solution consistent with relevant Security Council resolutions. Security that lacks political legitimacy cannot endure. Crisis management, however necessary, cannot substitute for a genuine peace process. Mr. President, Excellencies, force can dominate a moment, but only justice can shape a future. If force worked, we would not be here having this debate. What is not resolved through dialogue will resurface louder, angrier, and more dangerous. Hence, any solution must be shaped with the involvement of all concerned stakeholders. Mr. President and Excellencies, beyond Gaza, we are alarmed by rising tensions along the blue line between Israel and Lebanon. We recall Security Council Resolution 1701 and support UNIFIL's stabilizing role. In Syria, humanitarian suffering continues amid political paralysis. Resolution 2254 remains the agreed framework for sustainable peace. Regional engagement must translate into a political movement that is inclusive, but not an acceptance of permanent stagnation. In Yemen, fragile steps toward de-escalation offer a chance that must not be squandered. Dialogue remains the only path that does not end in more deaths and destruction. Peace in the Middle East cannot be defined simply by what ends. It must be defined by what begins. Dignity, justice, and the freedom for people to build ordinary lives. It must offer a future where Jews and Palestinians, Christians and Muslims, Arabs and non-Arabs can live not only side by side, but together working in the same hospitals, trading in the same markets, studying in the same universities, protecting shared water sources, building businesses, and competing in ideas rather than arms. Finally, Mr. President, Liberia will close with the following. We call for expanded regular humanitarian corridors into Gaza and all conflict zones in the region. We urge support for confidence-building measures facilitated by UN peace-building measures, peacekeeping, regional partners support. We encourage regional actors and international partners to sustain diplomatic momentum and avoid the collapse of current openings. We call on all stakeholders to support efforts that restore political legitimacy, governance capacity, and economic stability for both Israelis and Palestinians. And we stress the need to promote regional commitments to stop the use of children in conflicts and to shield schools and hospitals from attacks or misuse. Liberia stands ready to work with all council members for sustainable peace in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Nyanti for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Georgios Gerapetriadis, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the Deputy Special Coordinator for his briefing and welcome the new elected members of the Council. We're looking forward to working with all of you. Distinguished colleagues, as Greece continues its tenure on this Council, we do so with clarity of purpose and a strong sense of responsibility. At a time when the international system is facing profound challenges, the United Nations and the Security Council in particular continues to provide the central and indispensable framework for dialogue, cooperation, and collective action in support of international peace and security. Greece's foreign policy is firmly grounded in respect for the Charter of the United Nations and the principles enshrined therein: respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders, and the prohibition of the threat of use of force. These principles are not abstract ideals. They constitute the foundation of a stable international order and guide our collective work within this Council. Peace in the Middle East is an urgent moral, political, and humanitarian imperative. Greece consistently supports all initiatives that can have a tangible, positive impact on the ground and bring the region closer to a lasting peace and stability. In this spirit, we have strongly supported the comprehensive plans for Gaza and voted in favor of Security Council Resolution 2803. We acknowledge the progress achieved towards sustained ceasefire and the implementation of the 20-point Gaza peace plan endorsed by this Council. We have been very relieved that the body of the last hostage has been returned to his family. This development concludes a deeply painful chapter for the families. It also opens the path for the full implementation of Phase 2, which is a truly decisive moment. This next step must include full disarmament of Hamas and other armed groups. Addressing Israel's legitimate long-term security concerns is a key precondition for sustainable peace. The nomination of a Palestinian National Committee for the administration of Gaza with the support of the presidency of the Palestinian Authority is a welcome development. It represents an important step towards legitimate and accountable governance, which is indispensable for stability, reconstruction, and long-term peace. The future reconstruction of Gaza must be credible, coordinated, and firmly anchored in legitimate governance structures and embedded in a broader political and credible political horizon. Gaza and the West Bank is a single, indivisible territorial unit for a future Palestinian state. The path forward is clear: a credible political process leading to a two-state solution, allowing Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side in peace and security. Greece stands ready to contribute actively and responsibly to the peace process, including through the scaling up of humanitarian assistance and the development aid in the West Bank. It continues to provide treatment to children from Gaza in Greek hospitals. We are also actively contributing to efforts aimed at stabilizing security conditions in Gaza, including through our participation in the Civil Military Coordination Center. Overall, our objective is clear: to help prepare the ground for the day after in Gaza, in close cooperation with the Palestinian National Committee and the Palestinian Authority, as well as with key regional partners such as Egypt. Peace requires the protection of civilians. Today, despite significant progress on the delivery of food and other goods, the humanitarian situation in Gaza remains difficult. Harsh weather conditions, devastated infrastructure, and shortages of food, water, and medical supplies continue to exacerbate suffering. Humanitarian access, including via Cyprus Maritime Corridor, must therefore be unimpeded. We're also concerned with recent developments affecting UNRWA, notably the demolition of its facilities in East Jerusalem. Beyond Gaza, the situation in the West Bank is steadily deteriorating. Rising settler violence, including against Christian communities, erodes trust and fuels instability on the ground. We also call for a halt to settlement activities, including in the E1 area. As the Greek Prime Minister stated during his recent visit to Ramallah and Jerusalem, Greece's support for the Palestinian Authority is unwavering. It remains the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and as such must be empowered politically and financially. The Palestinian Authority has been very serious in promoting reforms. Withheld tax revenues must be released immediately. Equally, the preservation of the status quo of the holy sites in Jerusalem is of paramount importance. Jerusalem is not only a city of profound religious significance, but a litmus test for coexistence and mutual respect. Mr. President, turning to Lebanon, this Council's visit to Beirut last December was more than symbolic. And a clear message: Lebanon is not alone. We welcome the progress achieved in phase 1 of the National Disarmament Plan, which brings Lebanon closer to restoring full control over its territory in line with relevant Security Council resolutions. Nevertheless, disarmament must be coupled with sustained capacity building as well as clear plan for reconstruction. Greece considers Lebanon as a key partner for peace. It will support Lebanon in its efforts for security and prosperity. It recently delivered military equipment to the Lebanese armed forces and stands ready to do more. In the same vein, we welcome the organization of an international conference in Paris on March 5, aiming at garnering international support toward the LAF, and we're looking forward to our participation. For Syria, Mr. President, 2025 has been a landmark year. The fall of the Assad regime gives a historic opportunity to a country of great importance for the Arab world and the Eastern Mediterranean. Greece stands by Syria and is offering support bilaterally and in its capacity as EU and Security Council member. We must acknowledge the progress achieved so far, but we should also not disregard the persisting challenges. We welcome the assurances by the Syrian government regarding adherence to international law and good neighborly relations. We expect them to be honored, especially in terms of maritime delimitations with neighboring states. Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity must be fully respected. We also support the country's engagement with the United Nations and warmly encourage its further enhancement, looking forward to the prompt establishment of the Office of the Special Envoy in Damascus. At the same time, we should not forget that 2025 was marked by violence against Alawites, Druze, Christians, and lately the Kurds. We need more information, clarity, and indeed accountability. We reiterate the need for an inclusive transition and protection of all Syrians, including women, without any discrimination whatsoever due to religious or ethnic background, as a prerequisite for stability and recovery. Syria's wealth lies in its diverse and pluralistic society. Civilians must be protected under all circumstances. The latest developments in the Northeast prove how fragile the transition remains and causes concern. The ceasefire agreement reached between the Syrian government and the SDF should be fully implemented by all sides. We call on all actors, including external actors, to act with restraint and avoid escalation that could destabilize the country and exacerbate ethnic tensions. The protection of Kurds must be fully ensured and their political and cultural rights safeguarded in a united Syria. We would also like to underline the need to tackle terrorism and the fight against Daesh, ISIS should continue, and detainees camps must be fully safeguarded. Finally, on Yemen, we reaffirm our full respect for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, and we call upon all parties to engage constructively and in good faith in an inclusive, Yemeni-led and Yemeni-owned political process under the auspices of the United Nations. Despite the escalation in the south, we remain vigilant. While the situation in the Red Sea is becoming more complicated, we reiterate the importance of maritime security and freedom of navigation. The Red Sea constitutes a vital waterway for the region and the world, and the Houthis continue to pose a serious threat in this regard. Greece, honoring its long maritime tradition, will continue to support regional and international activities and provide her leadership to EU naval operation Aspides in line with Council resolutions and in full respect of international law. In conclusion, Mr. President, Greece remains fully committed to working with all members of this Council, with the United Nations and with regional partners to turn commitments into action so that hope prevails over suffering, dignity over despair, and peace becomes a reality delivered. As a country of the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece is deeply conscious of the direct impact that instability in the region has on international peace and security. This awareness, together with our long-standing commitment to multilateralism and international law, underpins our readiness to act as a constructive and reliable partner in efforts to promote dialogue, de-escalation, and lasting peace. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Jared Petraeus, for his statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Deputy Special Coordinator Al-Akbarah, for your briefing. It was good to spend time with you late last year. Welcome to our colleagues, Your Excellencies of Foreign Ministers from Greece and Liberia. First and foremost, we should truly take heart that Ron Gavili's remains have finally returned to his family, who have suffered through unthinkable hardship for far too long. His funeral was today, and we hope his return brings a measure of solace and closure for the family that I also had the honor to spend some time with. And we are, I think we all hope, the remains of all the deceased are returned to their loved ones, those that were killed in this horrible war started by Hamas, so that these families can have some type of closure and peace. Colleagues, for the first time since 2014, and over a decade, Hamas and its terrorist affiliates no longer hold any hostages in Gaza. That's extraordinary. And we should take note of it. And I hope all those who claimed Hamas didn't know the locations of every hostage understand, frankly, their error. It is only due to the relentless efforts of the Israeli people and government, the tireless work of President Trump, his special envoys, Witkoff and Kushner, and the strong pressure put on Hamas, brought to bear by not only the United States, but our partners in the region, that all the hostages have at last returned home, and we could take those yellow ribbons off our lapels. Colleagues, on January 16th, President Trump celebrated the formation of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. For the first time since 2007, the people of Gaza who desperately want peace, and they want peace and not Hamas, its supporters or its enablers, they have an opportunity to chart a peaceful future for the Gaza Strip. We are grateful, deeply grateful, for Dr. Ali Sheikh's leadership of the National Committee and for our partnership with those serving alongside him to restore public services, to rebuild civil institutions, and to stabilize daily life in Gaza. Last week in Davos, President Trump announced the Board of Peace, and with it, the transition to phase 2 of the 20-point plan, both of which were established and endorsed by this committee in Resolution 2803. The results of phase 1 speak for themselves. A ceasefire that the entire world were begging for and demanding. Humanitarian aid that was so desperately needed. And the release and return of all hostages to their families. Phase 2 will advance the full demilitarization and reconstruction of Gaza in line with the president's plan and with Security Council Resolution 2803. On behalf of the United States, I would like to thank all those that have committed to joining the Board of Peace, especially fellow council members Bahrain and Pakistan. Under President Trump's chairmanship, the Board of Peace is acting and not just talking. With the president's vision and tenacity, the board will help realize a new Gaza and a break from this decades-old cycle of violence. We realize it's unconventional. Change makes some uncomfortable. But with this innovative approach, we are leaving behind decades of wasted time, wasted money, and wasted chances for peace. And we are already seeing results. With the cooperation and assistance of Israel and our Board of Peace partners, over 55,000 trucks have entered Gaza, bringing food, shelter, and medicine since the ceasefire began. Over 1.3 million people have received food assistance in December. We welcomed the reopening of Allenby Gate and King Hussein Bridge, the crossing between Israel and Jordan, and we welcome the full reopening of the Rafah border crossing, which will expedite the flow of medical evacuations. But we must take care. Assistance cannot devolve into dependence, and with support from the High Representative for Gaza, Nikolai Mladinov, the National Committee will restore essential services throughout Gaza and foster an economy where opportunity replaces unemployment and dependence. But before we can reach this goal, Hamas and other militant groups must lay down their arms. Point 1 of the president's 20-point plan is that Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. They must live up to their end of the bargain. Point 2 is that Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered for far too long and for more than enough. Only de-radicalization, only disarmament, only demilitarization will bring Gaza prosperity and stability. And we, along with our partners on the Board of Peace and in consultation with the National Committee, will apply pressure to Hamas to honor its commitment and to disarm. Hamas must not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly or indirectly, in any form, period. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. International, independent monitors will supervise a process of demilitarization of Gaza to include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and a peaceful coexistence with its neighbors. We salute and thank our friends who have agreed to contribute to the International Stabilization Force under the leadership of Major General Jasper Jeffers of the United States Army. The ISF will begin to establish control and stability so that the Israeli Defense Forces can withdraw from Gaza based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization. These will be agreed upon between the IDF, the ISF, the guarantors, and the United States with an objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to its neighbors or its citizens. Colleagues, the United States remains fully committed to working in close partnership with Israel, with key Arab and Muslim majority nations, and with the international community to bring the peace, the prosperity, and the security and dignity to the region that its people deserve. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank Deputy Special Coordinator Alakbarov for his briefing, and I also join others in welcoming the foreign ministers of Liberia and Greece to the Council today. This week brought the long-awaited return of the final remaining hostage in Gaza, Rangvili, killed while defending families at Kibbutz Alumim during the brutal Hamas attack on October the 7th. As my Foreign Secretary said, our thoughts are with Rand's family as they now finally lay him to rest. The suffering of October the 7th and the devastating conflict that followed serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of our collective efforts to secure lasting peace in the Middle East. I will make 3 points. First, we welcome the announcement of the Palestinian National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, an important step in implementing the peace plan and putting Palestinians at the heart of efforts to recover and rebuild. We call for the swift implementation of Phase 2 of the peace plan as set out in Security Council Resolution 2803, including the withdrawal of Israeli forces, the decommissioning of Hamas's weapons, the deployment of the ISF, and a clear timeline for the transition of governance from the Board of Peace to a reformed Palestinian Authority. Hamas can have no role in the future governance of Gaza. Second, for the peace plan to succeed, we must also see urgent action to address the still catastrophic humanitarian situation. The UN reports that at least 9 infants have died of hypothermia this winter, including a 3-month-old baby last week. This is completely unconscionable, especially when life-saving shelter and medical supplies remain at the border, blocked by Israeli authorities. We welcome Israel's commitment to partially open the Rafah crossing. But this is not enough. Rafah and all crossings must be fully opened to allow life-saving humanitarian supplies to enter at scale. The UK condemns Israel's egregious attacks against UNRWA's compound in East Jerusalem and its restrictions on the work of international NGOs. These are the backbone of the humanitarian response, providing $1 billion of funding annually. And without them, Palestinians will face yet more suffering. We call on Israel to fulfill its humanitarian commitments under President Trump's 20-point plan and its obligations under international law. Finally, we cannot allow the deeply concerning trajectory of Israeli actions in the West Bank to undermine our efforts to secure peace. We condemn ongoing settler violence and outpost construction in Area B. And we call upon the Israeli government to tackle this with effective law enforcement and accountability measures as needed. Israeli movement restrictions and incursions into Area A must cease. We oppose ongoing illegal settlement expansion, including recent developments around E1. President, we cannot afford to lose momentum towards peace. The UK remains committed to supporting swift implementation of Resolution 2803 and to forging a new future built upon a two-state solution with Israelis and Palestinians living in peace, security, and dignity. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement, and now give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席，我感谢阿拉克巴罗夫副特别协调员的通报。中东是人类文明的摇篮，却长期饱受战乱之祸、流离之苦，是全球热点问题最集中的地区。当前，中东再次站在历史的十字路口，安全形势敏感脆弱，各种矛盾相互叠加。巴勒斯坦问题仍是中东问题的核心。国际社会应当进一步凝聚共识，推动巴勒斯坦问题早日得到全面、公正、持久解决。第一，以维护和平稳定为首要，立即停止一切暴力冲突。我们欢迎所有人质或人质遗体均已返回以色列。加沙第一阶段停火协议达成已经3个多月，但军事袭击仍未停止，平民伤亡不断攀升。约旦河西岸局势紧张，占领方持续扩大定居点，纵容定居者暴力。中方呼吁有关各方，特别是以色列，全面遵守停火协议，推动实现加沙全面持久停火。以色列应立即停止定居点活动，遏制定居者暴力， 第二，以缓解平民苦难为关键，畅通被占领土人道援助。加沙人道局势仍然危急，人道物资准入受到限制。我们敦促以色列履行国际人道法义务，开放全部过境点，解除人道物资准入限制，停止对人道机构的打压。近日，联合国近东巴勒斯坦难民救济和工程处在东耶路撒冷的馆舍遭到强拆和纵火，中方对此表示严重关切。以色列有义务确保工程处的特权、豁免和正常履职。第三，以两国方案为遵循，稳妥推进加沙战后安排。加沙是巴勒斯坦人民的家园，加沙的战后安排事关巴勒斯坦问题的政治解决。任何关于加沙未来的安排，都应坚持8人制8原则，尊重巴勒斯坦人民的意愿，照顾中东国家的合理关切，并同两国方案相衔接。中方将继续支持巴勒斯坦在加沙战后治理中的主体地位。安理会肩负着维护国际和平与安全的首要责任，应当继续对加沙局势和战后安排保持密切关注，发挥应有作用。主席，当前伊朗局势引发广泛关注，中东地区战云密布，紧张气氛不断加剧。伊朗是独立的主权国家，伊朗的事情应由伊朗人民自主决定。中方希望并支持伊朗保持国家稳定，支持维护伊朗主权、安全和领土完整。武力解决不了问题，任何军事冒险行动只会将地区推向不可预知的深渊。我们呼吁各方恪守联合国宪章宗旨和原则，反对干涉别国内政，反对在国际关系中使用或威胁使用武力。中方希望美方等有关方面正视国际社会和地区国家的呼声，多做有利于中东和平稳定的事，避免激化矛盾，火上浇油。主席，中东是中东人民的中东，不是大国博弈的角斗场，也不应成为域外国家地缘争夺的受害者。中方愿同国际社会一道，尊重中东人民的自主选择，重视地区国家的合理关切，共同为促进中东和平稳定发挥建设性作用。谢谢主席。
I thank the representative of China for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, je remercie tout d'abord Monsieur le coordonnateur spécial adjoint pour le processus de paix au Moyen-Orient, Monsieur Ramiz Alakbarov, pour son exposé. Je souhaite également la bienvenue à leurs excellences Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères du Libéria et Monsieur le ministre des Affaires étrangères de Grèce, et je salue la présence de nos collègues, les représentants permanents de Palestine et d'Israël, ainsi que la participation de nombreux États à ce débat ouvert. Monsieur le Président, 100 jours après la conclusion du cessez-le-feu à Gaza, grâce aux efforts des États-Unis, de l'Égypte, de la Turquie et du Qatar que nous saluons, l'urgence humanitaire à Gaza demeure. La réponse aux besoins immenses de la population reste insuffisante. Il est urgent qu'Israël lève tous les obstacles à l'accès humanitaire. Pour que les Nations Unies et les ONG puissent opérer de manière indépendante et impartiale partout dans Gaza, conformément au droit international humanitaire, nous demandons que cesse d'abord le désenregistrement de dizaines d'ONG internationales, dont de nombreuses françaises. Deuxièmement, les pressions croissantes envers l'UNRWA qui se sont traduites notamment par la démolition de son siège à Jérusalem, en violation des privilèges et immunités de l'ONU. Troisièmement, les restrictions excessives sur les biens, y compris ceux dits à double usage. Et enfin, quatrièmement, la fermeture persistante de certains points de passage. À ce titre, le point de passage de Rafah doit être pleinement ouvert dans les deux sens, conformément au plan de paix. Monsieur le Président, la France rend hommage à Ran Dvili, dernier otage israélien retenu par le Hamas, dont la dépouille a pu être rapatriée en Israël. Elle adresse ses condoléances à sa famille et à ses proches. Cette restitution met le point final au cauchemar, commencé par les attaques terroristes du Hamas le 7 octobre et la capture inhumaine de 251 personnes qui furent soumises à un insoutenable cauchemar. Ce rapatriement ouvre la voie au plein engagement de la deuxième phase du plan de paix du président Trump en 20 points pour Gaza, qui doit permettre d'aboutir à une paix durable. La France salue les efforts des médiateurs en ce sens et elle appelle toutes les parties à respecter leurs engagements. La formation d'un comité national pour l'administration de Gaza, partie intégrante de la Palestine, est un élément essentiel de l'appropriation par les Palestiniens de cette nouvelle phase. Il doit, ce comité national, se déployer sur le terrain et répondre aux besoins urgents de la population avec le soutien de l'autorité palestinienne et le soutien de la communauté internationale. La France entend y contribuer pleinement. Cette étape doit ouvrir la voie au désarmement du Hamas, qui ne doit plus avoir sa place dans la gouvernance de Gaza, et au retour d'une autorité palestinienne réformée à Gaza, afin de rétablir un horizon politique crédible pour la solution à deux États, conformément à la déclaration de New York. S'agissant de l'établissement du Conseil de la paix, son texte fondateur soulève des questions politiques et juridiques, notamment quant à son champ d'application et à sa gouvernance. Pour la France, son action s'inscrit dans le cadre de la résolution 2803 et dans le respect de la charte de l'ONU. À cet égard, il importe que le Conseil de sécurité puisse être régulièrement tenu informé de l'état d'avancement de la mise en œuvre de la résolution 2803. Monsieur le Président, la situation en Cisjordanie et à Jérusalem-Est continue de se dégrader. Les violences des colons, l'accélération de la colonisation, y compris l'avancée du projet E1, l'intensification des opérations militaires et les atteintes au statu quo des lieux saints sapent les perspectives de paix, y compris la mise en œuvre du plan de paix. La France condamne toute violence. Elle condamne l'attaque commise par un Palestinien ayant fait 2 morts dans le nord d'Israël le 26 décembre dernier. Elle condamne l'attaque de colons le 17 janvier à l'est de Ramallah, au cours de laquelle des résidents locaux et des ressortissants étrangers, dont une Française, ont été agressés. Nous demandons aux autorités israéliennes de faire toute la lumière sur cette attaque et d'engager des poursuites contre ses auteurs. Au-delà, nous rappelons que la paix et la sécurité, pour les Israéliens comme pour les Palestiniens, passent, comme l'a rappelé fortement notre Assemblée générale en septembre dernier, par la solution des deux États, Israël et Palestine, dans toutes ses dimensions. Monsieur le Président, la France souhaite aussi saisir cette occasion pour adresser au Conseil et à la région 2 messages. Tout d'abord, l'importance du respect du cessez-le-feu en Syrie et de l'intégration des forces démocratiques syriennes dans l'armée syrienne et les institutions étatiques. Deuxièmement, la nécessité d'appuyer les progrès des autorités libanaises en faveur du monopole de l'État sur les armes. La France organisera à cet titre, avec les États-Unis et les Arabies saoudites, une conférence internationale de soutien le 5 mars prochain à Paris. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Deputy Special Coordinator Alak Barrow for his informative briefing. Mr. President, we are relieved that the earthly remains of the last hostage held in Gaza since the terror attack on October 7 has finally been returned. And we hope that this can contribute to healing, for the families affected. Denmark welcomes the announcement of phase 2 of President Trump's peace plan. This moment carries a fragile but powerful promise, a hope that suffering may give way to stability. But hope on its own cannot rebuild lives. It needs to be supported by concrete actions. The Security Council has a key role in overseeing the implementation of Resolution 2803, including the work of the Board of Peace. While some elements of the Charter of the Board of Peace raise concerns, we wish the Board of Peace will be successful in implementing the peace plan for Gaza and effective as a transitional administration in Gaza in line with Resolution 2803 and the UN Charter. With the formation of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, we count on Palestinians to be involved in matters related to Palestinian territory. As we are entering phase 2, we call on Hamas and other armed groups to decommission their weapons, because Hamas and other terrorist organizations must be disarmed and no longer play a role in Gaza. Furthermore, we call on Israel to facilitate a full reopening of the Rafah border crossing in both directions. These are central elements of the peace plan. Mr. President, despite some improvements, the humanitarian needs in Gaza remain vast and urgent. Families continue to struggle for shelter, protection, and medical care. The deregistration of at least 37 international non-governmental organizations operating in Gaza and the West Bank risks undermining the progress that has been made. International NGOs are responsible for nearly 3/4 of all shelter-related activities and deliver more than 80% of basic necessities. Their presence and unimpeded access are crucial to meeting urgent needs at the scale required. We call on Israel to reverse this decision. We also urge Israel to urgently allow for unrestricted access of aid, including dual-use items. As specified in Resolution 2803, this Council has underscored the importance of full resumption of humanitarian aid in a manner consistent with the humanitarian principles. Humanitarian assistance must never be obstructed. It is not a bargaining chip. It is a lifeline for the civilian population. The health system must also be restored, and patients in need of specialized care must be able to be transferred for treatment, especially to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, through the medical corridor in place before October 7, 2023. The UN-led humanitarian system remains best placed to undertake the monumental task of getting aid into those in need. United Nations agencies, working hand in hand with international NGOs, form the backbone of life-saving assistance and recovery in Gaza. In this regard, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern over Israel's adoption of legislation in December 2025 to cease UNRWA operations. These laws must be repealed without delay. Israel's demolition of an UNRWA compound in East Jerusalem last week is unacceptable and a violation of the UN's privileges and immunities under the UN Charter and international law. The inviolability of UN premises must be upheld, the privileges and immunities of UNRWA personnel respected, and all seized assets returned. As we look to the next stage of the peace plan for Gaza, we must not forget the West Bank, where unprecedented devastating developments are currently unfolding. As we heard from the Deputy Special Coordinator, this includes record numbers of expansions of illegal Israeli settlements, settler violence, intimidation, the seizure of farmland, and destruction of crops with widespread impunity. Families are forced to flee their homes. A recent example was the displacement this week of all 120 families in Ras Ain al-Auja Bedouin community in the Jordan Valley due to the escalating violence by the Israeli settlers. We urge Israel to immediately halt these measures. Mr. President, peace demands a clear path forward. A two-state solution remains the only viable option for long-term sustainable peace, one in which Gaza and the West Bank are reunited, and where Palestinians and Israelis alike can live in security, freedom, and dignity. We hope that the implementation of the second phase of the peace plan will help turn the page and open a new chapter for Gaza. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement and now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos la exposición informativa presentada por el doctor Ramiz Alakbarov, coordinador especial adjunto y coordinador residente de la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas para el Proceso de Paz en Medio Oriente. A su vez, extendemos una cordial bienvenida a los ministros de Relaciones Exteriores de Liberia y Grecia, así como a todos los distinguidos representantes de las delegaciones que nos distinguen hoy con su participación. Los acontecimientos recientes en el Medio Oriente confirman la naturaleza dinámica y compleja de la región, marcada por desafíos multidimensionales que exigen una atención sostenida y coordinada de la comunidad internacional. Pese al alto al fuego en vigor desde el 10 de octubre, la situación sobre el terreno en Gaza continúa siendo extremadamente frágil. Si bien el cese de hostilidades ha reducido la intensidad del conflicto, sigue siendo insuficiente para garantizar una protección efectiva y sostenida de la población civil. En ese contexto, Panamá reconoce los esfuerzos de mediación emprendidos por los Estados Unidos, Qatar, Egipto y Turquía como una contribución determinante para alcanzar un alto al fuego duradero y sostenido. De igual manera, reconocemos los esfuerzos del sistema de las Naciones Unidas y de sus socios humanitarios que han permitido avances concretos en un entorno sumamente adverso. No obstante, dichos avances siguen siendo frágiles y dependen de un acceso humanitario pleno, seguro, sostenido y sin obstáculos administrativos o burocráticos que impidan su operatividad. Hace unos días se confirmó la liberación de los restos mortales de Ran Gibli, último de los 251 rehenes capturados donde el atroz ataque terrorista de Hamas del 7 de octubre de 2023. Reiteramos nuestras condolencias a todos los familiares de las víctimas y expresamos la esperanza de que el pueblo de Israel pueda poner punto final a este trágico episodio. Panamá votó en este Consejo a favor de la resolución 2803 de 2025, convencidos de la necesidad de abrir un espacio político que permitiera consolidar el cese de hostilidades, facilitar la asistencia humanitaria y sentar las bases para una fase de estabilización y transición en Gaza. Ese espacio ofrece una oportunidad que no debe perderse. Consideramos que los mecanismos previstos en dicha resolución para la implementación del plan de paz, incluida la Junta de Paz, deben ser impulsados de manera coordinada y contar con el acompañamiento efectivo de las Naciones Unidas, en particular del Consejo de Seguridad, como fuente primigenia de su legitimidad. Expresamos nuestra preocupación por los recientes hechos que han afectado las instalaciones de UNRWA y reafirmamos el principio de inviolabilidad de los locales de Naciones Unidas, así como los privilegios e inmunidades de su personal que los estados están obligados a respetar. Instamos a que las organizaciones no gubernamentales que han acompañado el enorme esfuerzo humanitario, pese a las extremas condiciones en el terreno, puedan continuar haciéndolo sin obstáculos para que contribuyan a la conclusión exitosa del plan de paz. Reafirmamos que la última vía sostenible y humana es aquella que permita a los pueblos de Israel y Palestina vivir lado a lado, en paz, seguridad y dignidad, y en un futuro ojalá cercano. Por otra parte, observamos con preocupación las medidas desproporcionadas adoptadas por el gobierno de la República Islámica de Irán en respuesta a manifestaciones ciudadanas destinadas a expresar demandas legítimas de libertad. Las detenciones arbitrarias, las desapariciones forzadas, las restricciones a la libertad de reunión y las acciones dirigidas a silenciar a las familias de las víctimas contravienen las obligaciones internacionales en materia de derechos humanos y refuerzan la urgencia de darle voz al pueblo iraní y una apertura hacia la comunidad internacional. En cuanto a Siria, Panamá reafirma su respaldo al proceso de transición política liderado y asumido por los sirios. Y subrayamos que una paz duradera solo será posible mediante la integración inclusiva de todas las minorías, respetando la soberanía nacional y la integridad territorial del país. Valoramos los esfuerzos recientes de las autoridades interinas por priorizar la contención y el diálogo en Alepo y sus alrededores, y reafirmamos la obligación de todas las partes de cumplir el acuerdo del 19 de enero, respetar el derecho internacional humanitario y proteger a la población civil. Asimismo, Panamá subraya que el terrorismo sigue constituyendo una amenaza grave para la paz y la seguridad de la región. Reiteramos la necesidad de que se prevenga la reactivación de grupos terroristas, se gestione de manera segura los centros de detención y se garantice la repatriación responsable de combatientes extranjeros. También mantenemos una atención especial sobre la situación en el sur de Yemen, donde las últimas semanas se ha registrado un aumento de tensiones y enfrentamientos que afectan gravemente la seguridad, la estabilidad y las condiciones humanitarias de la población civil. En este contexto, reiteramos la necesidad de priorizar una agenda genuinamente nacional y subrayamos el papel central que corresponde al propio pueblo yemení en las decisiones relativas a su futuro y a la gobernanza de su país. De igual forma, la situación en el Líbano continúa caracterizándose por una elevada volatilidad. La visita realizada por este Consejo en diciembre permitió constatar la fragilidad del alto al fuego vigente, las persistentes tensiones a lo largo de la frontera sur y los desafíos asociados a la implementación de la resolución 1701 del 2006. Panamá reafirma la importancia de preservar la estabilidad a lo largo de la línea azul, de respetar plenamente el mandato de la Fuerza Provisional de las Naciones Unidas en el Líbano y de fortalecer el apoyo al ejército libanés como pilar esencial de la soberanía y la integridad territorial del país. Reconocemos asimismo a las mujeres que en todo el Medio Oriente, desde la sociedad civil y los espacios políticos que logran ocupar, abren caminos hacia la igualdad y la justicia, recordándonos que no puede haber paz ni desarrollo sin su participación plena, segura y significativa. Señor presidente, el futuro del Medio Oriente no puede construirse a espaldas de sus pueblos, ni los modelos impuestos desde el exterior, ni la intransigencia de actores políticos sin legitimidad ni respaldo popular ofrecen soluciones a los complejos desafíos que enfrenta la región. La estabilidad de la región y su contribución a la paz y la seguridad internacionales serán el resultado de la suma de acciones que, aunque parezcan pequeñas, reflejan el sacrificio de mujeres y hombres que salvan vidas, alimentan a los más vulnerables, educan a los niños y eligen cada día la paz por encima de la violencia, dando fe de que el mejor futuro es el que se construye con base al respeto al diferente. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель, благодарим заместителя спецкоординатора ООН по Ближневосточному мирному процессу Рамиза Алакбарова
за брифинг о положении дел в регионе. Динамика ситуации последних дней в зоне Палестино-израильского конфликта дает основания для осторожного оптимизма и надежды на окончательный переход от логики конфронтации и насилия к дипломатии и экономическому возрождению. Приветствуем возвращение в Израиль тела последнего заложника Рона Гвили, что стало возможным благодаря передаче информации о его местонахождении палестинцам. Пусть раны, нанесенные израильской нацией 7 октября 2023 года, еще свежи, будем надеяться, что это символическое событие, ознаменовавшее окончательное воссоединение всех семей со своими близкими, заложит прочный фундамент для восстановления отношений между двумя народами. При этом ни в коем случае не следует забывать и о палестинцах, потерявших близких или разлученных со своими родными. Помимо свыше 70 тысяч погибших от ударов, голода и холода, палестинцы с момента прекращения огня в октябре 2025 года из-под завалов Газы выкопано 710 тел, тысячи продолжают покоиться там. Обнаружение каждого из них имеет не меньшее значение для палестинского народа и дела примирения. Отмечаем долгожданное начало второй фазы мирного плана президента Трампа, о котором 14 января объявила американская сторона. Запуск работы переходной структуры в анклаве, в первую очередь Национального комитета по управлению Газой во главе с опытным функционером ПНА Али Шаасом, закладывают основу для процесса восстановления сектора. Убеждены, что успех в реализации мирной инициативы возможен лишь при неукоснительном уважении интересов и прав палестинского народа, а также при тесной координации временных структур с ПНА. Подчеркиваем недопустимость любых планов по насильственному перемещению газовитян, какими бы благовидными предлогами они ни обставлялись. Ожидаем в обозримой перспективе восстановления административного, политического и экономического единства Газа и СБРИ, включая Восточный Иерусалим, в рамках палестинского государства в границах 1967 года. Ждем от американской стороны больше конкретики по поводу перспектив развертывания в секторе международных стабилизационных сил, в том числе по составу, численности и мандату данной миссии. Исходя из многолетнего опыта миротворческих операций, полагаем, что эффективность МСС будет напрямую зависеть от наличия согласия сторон и способности беспристрастно выполнять подмандатные задачи. При этом применение силы должно быть строго ограничено во избежание втягивания миротворцев в качестве одной из сторон конфликта. В целом полагаем, что дальнейшая реализация мирного плана потребует от посредников фокусировки на поиске комплексного переговорного решения проблемы разоружения палестинских группировок и вывода израильских подразделений из Газы. Попытки силового решения ни к чему не приведут. Господин председатель, теперь, когда тело последнего заложника было возвращено, у израильской стороны не осталось никаких оснований для дальнейшего промедления с выполнением своих гуманитарных обязательств в отношении газовитян. Хотели бы напомнить, что гумобязательства Израиля заложены в пунктах 7 и 8 мирного плана президента Трампа, а также в оперативном параграфе 3, одобрившей его резолюции СБ ООН 2803, где прямо указывается на важность возобновления полномасштабной доставки гуманитарной помощи в сектор Газа через сотрудничающие организации, включая ООН. Речь идет в том числе и о необходимости полноценного открытия КПП «Рафах», о чем было объявлено только 26 января, то есть спустя 3,5 месяца после заключения соглашения о прекращении огня. К сожалению, гуманитарная ситуация в Газе продолжает оставаться катастрофической в условиях тотальных разрушений и ограничений на поставки грузов. Сохраняющиеся запреты на проведение гумопераций и ввоз необходимых товаров, а также техники для расчистки завалов, серьезно усугубляют положение газовитян. Палестинцы продолжают погибать под израильскими ударами, страдать от голода, фактического отсутствия медицинской помощи и доступа к образованию, к которым добавились зимние холода. С 10 октября 2025 года порядка 500 человек были убиты, как минимум 9 умерли от переохлаждения.
Информация, поступающая от гуманитарных организаций, наглядно свидетельствует о несоразмерности масштабов гуманитарных потребностей и фактического уровня реагирования. Более того, вызывает серьезную обеспокоенность тенденция к дальнейшему сужению гуманитарной активности, в том числе посредством введения Израилем дополнительных требований к регистрации гуманитарных неправительственных организаций, на долю которых приходится значительная часть жизненно важной работы. Исходя именно из острых нужд и насущных потребностей палестинцев, мы анонсировали готовность предоставить $1 миллиард США из замороженных прежней американской администрацией российских активов на проекты по восстановлению и реконструкции сектора Газа. Призываем Израиль воздержаться от действий, подрывающих гуманитарное реагирование, и обеспечить гуманитарным структурам безопасный и беспрепятственный доступ, необходимый для преодоления последствий одного из самых острых кризисов современности. Господин председатель, особого внимания требует ситуация вокруг Бапор. На протяжении десятилетий агентство играло ключевую и безальтернативную роль в оказании помощи палестинскому населению как на ОПТ, так и в соседних арабских странах. Мандат агентства был продлен на очередной трехлетний период до 30 июня 2029 года резолюцией 8078 Генассамблеи ООН, за которую проголосовало подавляющее большинство стран-членов. На Бапор также лежит историческая ответственность за обеспечение выполнения резолюции 194 о праве палестинских беженцев на компенсации и возвращение. При этом сегодня агентство сталкивается с беспрецедентным давлением и системными препятствиями в своей деятельности. К сожалению, Бапор вынужден направлять значительные усилия не только на поддержку нуждающихся, но и на защиту собственных сотрудников от угроз, давления и преследований. Израильская сторона запретила поставки электроэнергии и воды на объекты Бапор, отменила налоговые льготы и иммунитеты от судебных исков, право на использование банковских и платежных средств. До конца января начнется принудительное отключение от системы электро- и водоснабжения школ, клиник и коммунальных объектов агентства, что отразится на получении социально значимых услуг десятками тысяч арабских жителей Восточного Иерусалима. С начала эскалации боевых действий в Газе убито 309 сотрудников Бапор. Выражаем искренние соболезнования родным и близким и призываем к беспристрастному расследованию и привлечению виновных к ответственности. Отмечаем недавнее заявление генерального секретаря ООН с решительным осуждением антибапоровского курса Израиля, включая снос 20 января штаб-квартиры агентства. Выражаем озабоченность подобными беспрецедентными шагами. Призываем израильское руководство отменить их и воздерживаться от дальнейшей односторонней кампании против ООНовской гуманитарной структуры, соблюдать свои обязательства в качестве страны-члена ООН. Напоминаем о содержащемся письме генерального секретаря от 8 января опции с передачей вопроса в Международный суд в случае невозможности решить разногласия по Конвенции о привилегиях и иммунитетах ООН от 1946 года в двустороннем порядке. Касательно Иерусалима отмечаем приверженность резолюциям 476 и 478 Совета Безопасности ООН о его оккупированном статусе и непризнании действий Израиля по распространению на город своего суверенитета. Господин председатель, позиция нашей страны по палестино-израильскому регулированию принципиальна и не подвержена конъюнктуре. Подтверждаем нашу поддержку двугосударственной формуле и справедливому решению палестинской проблемы на общепризнанной международно-правовой основе, без которых невозможно достижение подлинного мира и прочной безопасности на Ближнем Востоке. Благодарю вас.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also join colleagues in thanking Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Sir Ramiz Al-Akbarov, for his comprehensive briefing. And we welcome UN's continued commitment to remain engaged on the Palestinian question in all its aspects. Pakistan welcomes the convening of this open debate at a time when cautious diplomatic progress coexists with serious humanitarian situation and continued violations on ground in Gaza and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. So, President, the unresolved Palestinian question is at the core of the instability in the Middle East. Palestinian people have endured decades of illegal occupation marked by dispossession, brutal repression, and the denial of their inalienable rights, including the right to self determination. Over the past 2 years in Gaza, this suffering escalated to an unprecedented scale, resulting in widespread civilian casualties, mass displacement, almost total destruction of infrastructure, and severe humanitarian deprivation. Against this backdrop, the international community sought to re anchor efforts towards diplomacy and a credible political pathway towards peace. Initiatives such as the High Level Conference on the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine, held last July, as well as President Trump's 20-point peace plan, subsequently endorsed by the Security Council Resolution 2803, reflect this renewed engagement. In line with Resolution 2803, the commencement of the second phase of the peace plan, including the establishment of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza and the establishment of the Board of Peace and executive committees, are important steps. As intended in the plan, these measures should now help consolidate the ceasefire, secure a permanent cessation of hostilities, facilitate transitional arrangements, enable recovery and reconstruction, ensure the provision of humanitarian assistance at scale, and prepare the ground for a sustainable and credible political process towards Palestinian self-determination and statehood. However, we are deeply concerned that the fragile situation in Gaza remains under constant strain. Ceasefire violations continue unabated and civilian lives remain at risk. Increased pressure on international humanitarian organizations, including deregistration measures and restrictions on humanitarian operations, are impeding assistance and protection for the most vulnerable. We strongly condemn Israel's continued attacks on the UN premises and UNRWA, including the recent demolition of UN compound in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of occupied East Jerusalem. Such actions undermine the stabilization efforts and threaten the limited progress achieved so far. UNRWA's operations remain essential and must be safeguarded. President, Pakistan, together with other Arab and Islamic countries in the Group of Eight, has joined the Board of Peace in support of its mandate as endorsed by the Security Council Resolution 2803. In a joint statement, the foreign ministers of the group reiterated their support for the peace efforts led by President Donald Trump and reaffirmed their commitment to implementing the mission of the Peace Board as a transitional administration as set out in Comprehensive Plan to End the Gaza Conflict and endorsed by Resolution 2803, aimed at consolidating a permanent ceasefire, supporting the reconstruction of Gaza, and advancing a just and lasting peace grounded in the Palestinian right to self-determination and statehood in accordance with international law, thereby paving the way for security and stability for all countries and peoples of the region. To ensure that current initiatives deliver tangible results, Pakistan underscores the following priorities. First, globally, on the process and its objectives. We hope that the Board of Peace, under the framework of Resolution 2803, will lead to concrete steps towards the implementation of a permanent ceasefire, further scaling up of humanitarian aid, reconstruction of Gaza, and realization of the right to self-determination of the people of Palestine through a credible, time-bound political process consistent with international legitimacy and UN resolutions, resulting in an independent, sovereign, and contiguous state of Palestine based on pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. That, Mr. President, is the ultimate goal supported by the international community. Palestinian-led governance and institutional strengthening with a central role of the Palestinian Authority are indispensable in this regard. Second, and specifically on ceasefire, full respect for the ceasefire must be ensured with a view to a permanent cessation of hostilities. Any military escalation, unilateral measures, or provocations must be strongly countered as they jeopardize civilian protection and undermine confidence building. Third, on the humanitarian situation, attacks on UN premises, UNRWA, humanitarian organizations and personnel, and their facilities, as well as administrative restrictions on international organizations, are unacceptable and contrary to international humanitarian law. Full, safe, sustained, and unimpeded humanitarian assistance at scale must be ensured. UNRWA's role in this regard remains critical. Fourth, recovery and reconstruction that should begin without delay, with no annexation, forced displacement, or alteration of the territorial unity of the occupied Palestinian territory. The contiguity of Gaza and the West Bank is indispensable for the viability of the Palestinian state. Fifth, illegal settlement activity, settler violence, and attempts to alter the demographic, legal, or historical character of the occupied territory, including the holy sites, must cease immediately. Israel, the occupying power, must also be compelled to immediately halt its illegal and destabilizing actions in Syria and Lebanon in violation of their sovereignty and territorial integrity and the relevant Security Council resolutions. Israel must completely vacate all occupied Arab territories. Sixth, accountability is indispensable. For without justice and respect for international law, there can be no durable peace. And finally, the political horizon. A credible, irreversible, and time-bound process culminating in the realization of Palestinian statehood in accordance with international legitimacy. All diplomatic initiatives, including President Trump's Gaza peace plan, a high-level conference on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine, and the Global Alliance for the Two-State Solution must reinforce one another through coordinated and concrete implementation. The international community, particularly this Council, bears the responsibility to translate renewed engagement into measurable change on the ground for the betterment of the Palestinian people. Pakistan's solidarity with the Palestinian people remains firm and unwavering. We stand ready to work with members of the Council, regional and international partners, and the United States to advance a just and lasting solution to the Palestinian question and a comprehensive peace in the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of Kingdom of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس، يطيب لي بداية أن أتقدم بالشكر لسعادتكم ولوفد جمهورية الصومال الفيدرالية الشقيقة على رئاستكم المتميزة لمجلس الأمن هذا الشهر، وأشكر السيد رامز لاكروف نائب المنسق الخاص لعملية السلام على إحاطته، كما أرحب بأصحاب السعادة وزراء خارجية اليونان وليبيريا في اجتماعنا اليوم، وأرحب بجميع المشاركين في هذه الجلسة. سيد الرئيس، تتطلع مملكة البحرين وشعوب منطقة الشرق الأوسط والعالم إلى إنهاء الصراع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي الذي استمر لنحو 80 سنة، وكبد المنطقة خسائر فادحة لا تعوض في الأرواح والأعيان والمقدرات والبنى التحتية، وحرم أجيالا متعاقبة من فرصة العيش في أمن واستقرار وحرية وكرامة في ظل غياب الحل العادل والدائم للقضية الفلسطينية. إن مملكة البحرين تؤمن إيمانا راسخا بضرورة أن يسود خطاب السلام والأمل في المنطقة وتوفير بيئة آمنة مستقرة مستدامة لتلبية حقوق الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق في تقرير المصير وإقامة دولته المستقلة ذات السيادة جنبا إلى جنب مع دولة إسرائيل، بما يسهم في تعزيز السلم والأمن والازدهار لصالح جميع شعوب المنطقة وصون المصالح الدولية كافة، وذلك عن طريق انتهاج الحلول السلمية لإنهاء هذا الصراع عبر الحوار والتفاوض والمساعي الدبلوماسية. ويأتي انعقاد هذه الجلسة متزامنا مع إحياء اليوم الدولي للتعايش السلمي الذي بادرت بلادي مملكة البحرين باقتراح اعتماده في الأمم المتحدة، انطلاقا من إيمانها بأن ترسيخ ثقافة الحوار والاحترام المتبادل والتسامح والتعايش بين الشعوب يشكل أساسا لا غنى عنه لتحقيق السلام العادل والمستدام، ولا سيما في منطقة عانت طويلا من النزاعات والصراعات كمنطقة الشرق الأوسط. وتشيد مملكة البحرين بالمبادرات الإيجابية التي تمهد الطريق نحو تحقيق السلام العادل والشامل والدائم في المنطقة، تجدد ترحيبها بالإعلان عن بدء المرحلة الثانية من الخطة الشاملة لإنهاء الصراع في غزة برعاية فخامة الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب، وما تضمنته من تشكيل اللجنة الوطنية الفلسطينية لإدارة قطاع غزة بوصفها هيئة انتقالية مؤقتة، متمنين للجنة التوفيق في مهامها من أجل خدمة أبناء الشعب الفلسطيني والحد من معاناتهم وتحسين ظروفهم المعيشية. وفي هذا السياق جاء توقيع مملكة البحرين على ميثاق مجلس السلام في دافوس بناء على توجيه حضرة صاحب الجلالة الملك حمد بن عيسى آل خليفة ملك مملكة البحرين، ترحيبا بالدعوة الموجهة إلى جلالته من فخامة الرئيس الأمريكي للانضمام إلى مجلس السلام، إيمانا من المملكة بأهمية الدفع قدما نحو التطبيق الكامل لخطة السلام المطروحة بشأن قطاع غزة بما تمثله من إطار دولي داعم لحماية وصون الحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق وتحقيق السلام المستدام في المنطقة. وتؤكد مملكة البحرين تقديرها للجهود التي تبذلها الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية في سبيل وقف الحرب وإحلال السلام المستدام في المنطقة، معربة عن أملها في أن يسهم مجلس السلام في تعزيز ودعم الاستقرار وتحقيق التنمية والازدهار للجميع. كما تدعو مملكة البحرين كافة الأطراف إلى العمل على إنجاح الجهود الدبلوماسية الأخيرة ولا سيما خطة ترامب للسلام، والتأكيد على اللجوء إلى الحوار والتفاوض لمعالجة أي عقبات أو شواغل، مؤكدين أهمية تثبيت وقف شامل ودائم لإطلاق النار في غزة وتسهيل إيصال المساعدات الإنسانية بشكل مستدام وكاف إلى المدنيين في القطاع، والبدء في إعادة الإعمار والتعافي. كما نؤكد رفض أي محاولات أو مخططات للتهجير القسري من الأراضي الفلسطينية أو التوسع الاستيطاني الذي يعد خرقاً لقرار مجلس الأمن 2334 أو المساس بالوضع التاريخي أو الديني القائم في مدينة القدس، باعتبارها مدينة احتضنت على مر التاريخ الديانات السماوية الثلاث، اليهودية والمسيحية والإسلام، في تآخٍ وسلام. وتؤكد في هذا الإطار على مخرجات القمة العربية 33 قمة البحرين ومبادرتها التي شملت الدعوة إلى عقد مؤتمر دولي للسلام وتكثيف الجهود الدبلوماسية الرامية إلى زيادة الاعتراف الدولي بدولة فلسطين ودعم قبولها كدولة كاملة العضوية في الأمم المتحدة وضرورة ضمان الحق في التعليم والخدمات الصحية للمتأثرين من الصراعات في المنطقة. كما نؤكد على أهمية دعم كافة الجهود الإقليمية والدولية الهادفة إلى رفع المعاناة عن الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، ومن ضمنها الجهود الإغاثية التي تطلع بها الأمم المتحدة عن طريق وكالة الأمم المتحدة لإغاثة وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين الأونرو لتقديم الدعم والإغاثة لملايين اللاجئين في الأراضي الفلسطينية والأردن وسوريا ولبنان إلى حين التوصل إلى حل سياسي عادل وشامل يضمن كافة حقوقه المشروعة وفق القانون الدولي وقرارات الشرعية الدولية. وتشيد مملكة البحرين بالخطوات الإيجابية التي تنتهجها السلطة الفلسطينية، ومنها قبولها بخطة فخامة الرئيس الأمريكي بشأن غزة وبقرار مجلس الأمن رقم 2803 باعتبارهما مسارا إيجابيا نحو وضع دائم ومستقر في قطاع غزة كجزء لا يتجزأ من الدولة الفلسطينية. كما ترحب مملكة البحرين بعزم السلطة الفلسطينية إجراء الانتخابات المحلية في الضفة الغربية وقطاع غزة في 15 من أبريل المقبل، تأكيداً على أهمية المسار الديمقراطي ومشاركة الشعب الفلسطيني في تقرير مستقبله. وفي الختام تجدد مملكة البحرين دعوتها للمجتمع الدولي إلى ضرورة دعم حقوق الشعب الفلسطيني في إقامة دولته الوطنية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية وفقاً لحل الدولتين وقرارات الشرعية الدولية ذات الصلة وقبولها كدولة كاملة العضوية في الأمم المتحدة. كما نؤكد على ضرورة العمل على تحقيق السلام العادل والشامل والمستدام في الشرق الأوسط وفق كافة قرارات الأمم المتحدة ذات الصلة وآخرها القرار 2803 ومبادرة السلام العربي لعام 2002، مؤكدين في هذا الإطار على التزام مملكة البحرين بصفتها عضواً في مجلس الأمن بمواصلة العمل مع أعضاء المجلس وسائر الأطراف المعنية لدعم الجهود الرامية إلى ضمان حقوق الشعب الفلسطيني المشروعة والمساهمة الفاعلة في تحقيق سلام عادل ودائم في الشرق الأوسط بما يحفظ الأمن والاستقرار الإقليمي ويصون السلم والأمن الدوليين ويتيح فرصة الازدهار لشعوب المنطقة كافة. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of the Kingdom of Bahrain and now give the floor the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Monsieur le Président, la République démocratique du Congo tient à féliciter la République fédérale de la Somalie pour la diligence avec laquelle elle a dirigé les travaux du Conseil de sécurité tout au long du mois de janvier qui s'achève et pour avoir pris l'initiative d'organiser ce débat trimestriel sur la situation au Moyen-Orient, y compris la question de la Palestine. Nous saluons la présence dans cette salle du coordonnateur spécial adjoint pour le processus de paix au Moyen-Orient, ainsi que celle de leurs excellences, Madame et Messieurs les ministres des Affaires étrangères du Libéria et de la Grèce. La République démocratique du Congo demeure préoccupée par la persistance des tensions et des foyers d'instabilité à travers le Moyen-Orient, notamment en Syrie, au Yémen ou encore au Liban. La région est marquée par l'enchevêtrement de crises politiques, sécuritaires et humanitaires, la fragmentation des dynamiques régionales, la multiplication des acteurs armés et le risque permanent d'escalade rappellent l'urgence d'une approche globale, cohérente et fondée sur le respect du droit international, afin de prévenir toute extension des conflits et préserver la paix et la sécurité régionale. Monsieur le Président, notre propos de ce matin va plus se focaliser sur la question palestinienne, épicentre de la crise au Moyen-Orient. Cette réunion intervient 2 mois après le momentum consacré par l'adoption de la résolution 2803. Elle offre l'opportunité pour le Conseil de se saisir, en ce début d'année 2026, des prémices d'un retour à la paix et à la stabilité au Moyen-Orient, particulièrement dans la bande de Gaza. Le Conseil a, par cette résolution, proposé un cadre pour une transition inclusive à Gaza, ce qui constitue une avancée importante. La crédibilité du Conseil de sécurité dépendra de sa mise en œuvre effective et transparente. D'emblée, la République démocratique du Congo aimerait saluer le leadership des États-Unis d'Amérique ainsi que les actions du Qatar, de la République arabe d'Égypte et de la République de Turquie dans la conclusion du plan d'ensemble visant à mettre fin au conflit à Gaza, particulièrement dans les efforts engagés pour l'obtention d'un cessez-le-feu entre les parties en conflit. Cette avancée historique suscite certes l'espoir d'une dynamique positive en faveur des populations piégées par la guerre, mais conduit également à rappeler, une fois de plus, la prévalence de la retenue, du dialogue et de la diplomatie comme solution aux crises, même les plus aiguës. Aussi, la situation de Gaza rappelle que, sans volonté politique réelle et sans engagement sincère, aucune désescalade ni aucune paix ne peuvent être envisagées. Monsieur le Président, la République démocratique du Congo note avec satisfaction les avancées sur le plan politique et diplomatique dans la résolution de la crise à Gaza. Elle salue notamment la récente nomination des animateurs du Conseil de paix et du Comité national pour l'administration de Gaza. Elle tient néanmoins à attirer l'attention du Conseil sur la situation humanitaire qui demeure profondément alarmante. La protection des civils, du personnel humanitaire et des infrastructures civiles doit rester une priorité absolue, conformément au droit international humanitaire. Malgré une amélioration partielle de l'acheminement de l'aide, les besoins demeurent immenses. La République démocratique du Congo appelle avec insistance à garantir un accès humanitaire sûr, rapide et sans entrave, ainsi qu'à un appui financier accru pour soutenir la réponse humanitaire des Nations unies. À cet égard, nous soulignons la nécessité d'une approche constructive face au rôle de l'Office de secours et des travaux des Nations unies pour les réfugiés de Palestine dans le Proche-Orient et les garanties de sécurité à accorder aux agents des Nations unies pendant l'exercice de leur mandat, en particulier celles touchant à la protection des populations civiles vulnérables. Monsieur le Président, pour conclure, les membres du Conseil ont une responsabilité collective de veiller au respect du cessez-le-feu et de s'assurer que celui-ci se transforme en une paix durable. Ils sont appelés à rester unis, vigilants et engagés afin d'accompagner les parties vers une stabilité réelle au bénéfice de toutes les populations de la région. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for his statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Deputy Special Coordinator, Mr. Ramiz Alakbarov, for his briefing. Mr. President, there are prospects for stability in the Middle East. The terrorist networks of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis have been severely degraded. The failed Iranian regime has been weakened. And its nuclear program has been set back decisively. The collapse of the Assad regime has brought relief to millions of Syrians and contributed to the wider stability of the region. As a fragile ceasefire in Gaza continues to hold, we must collectively engage in its consolidation. We need to build on this progress to end the immense human suffering of the Palestinian people and to provide them with opportunities to secure their daily livelihoods, reconstruct infrastructure, and regain their dignity and future. The people of Israel have to be assured that they can live in peace, security, and without the daily threat of terrorism. At last, 843 days since October 7, all of the hostages taken by Hamas are finally returned home. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Gwili family and all other families that endured this horror. Mr. President, Latvia supports the full implementation of President Trump's comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict. It must serve as a building block for broader stabilization in the Middle East. We welcome the launch of phase 2 of the comprehensive plan, which has commenced with the announcement of the Executive Board, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. We also welcome the work of the Civil Military Coordination Center. Further on, it is imperative that Hamas disarms and relinquishes power. We look forward to the Board of Peace in its transitional administration capacity, as endorsed by the Security Council Resolution 2803, to provide strategic oversight of the implementation of the comprehensive plan and redevelopment of Gaza for the benefit of its people. We also await the International Stabilization Force to be generated and to fulfill its security role. Mr. President, with the transitional governing bodies taking up their duties, there is a pathway for tangible reconstruction and development, with drinking water and food, as well as hospitals and schools to be accessible to everyone throughout Gaza. The Palestinian Authority has to be assisted in building institutional capacities, implementing its reform agenda, and addressing security challenges. Mr. President, the past 2 years have confirmed that breaking the cycle of violence requires sustained investment in a viable political solution, a peace that addresses the security concerns and the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. We should not lose sight of the objective of the two-state solution in accordance with international parameters as defined by Security Council resolutions and the New York Declaration endorsed last September. A just and lasting peace requires Gaza and the West Bank to be addressed as one unified entity. The unprecedented levels of violence, land confiscations, house demolitions, and settlement expansion that are emerging across the West Bank undermine international efforts aimed at achieving peace and stability in the region. We strongly oppose any steps towards territorial or demographic change in occupied Palestinian territories and urge Israel to halt its settlement policy in the West Bank. Mr. President, the ultimate value of any plan is determined not by its quality on paper, but by its effective and efficient execution in the real world. We commend the dedication and courage of humanitarian workers who, despite extremely difficult circumstances, have responded swiftly to the urgent needs of civilians in Gaza. The immediate flow of aid following the peace agreement last October provided a vital lifeline, and it should be continuously ensured without interruption or obstruction. Humanitarian needs remain immense and are further exacerbated by dire weather conditions, with most civilians still lacking access to shelter, clean water, and basic medical care. In this regard, the adoption of new registration requirements for international non-governmental organizations raises serious concerns about their potential impact on humanitarian assistance. Safeguarding and enabling predictable and non-discriminatory operating environment remains essential to ensure that this vital assistance can continue in line with international humanitarian and human rights law. We call on Israel to engage in meaningful dialogue with affected stakeholders. Mr. President, the situation in Iran has reached an alarming level of repression. The regime has killed thousands of innocent protesters. It continues to carry out mass repression and an attempt to silence protesters. Latvia stands in solidarity with the brave people of Iran. We demand an immediate end to the violent oppression of its people who are simply exercising their fundamental rights. Iran's ongoing support for armed proxies and its aggressive regional interventions undermine security and stability across the Middle East and beyond. The continued material support of the Iranian regime to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is despicable. Mr. President, we also take note of certain positive developments in the region that merit continued support from the international community. We welcome the Lebanese government's political commitment and efforts to foster economic recovery, reconstruction, and security, including steps taken to ensure the state's monopoly on weapons. We reaffirm our support to the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 1701 and the important role of UNIFIL. Emerging from decades of violence and grief, the new Syria has a historic opportunity to shape a future of peace, security, and prosperity for its people and neighbors. We welcome the efforts of Syrian transitional government to sustain security and advance an inclusive political transition and socio-economic recovery. In conclusion, let me emphasize that at a time when there is a glimmer of hope for stability and lasting peace in the Middle East, the international community must strengthen its collective commitment to this goal. In doing so, we must focus on the needs of people and their aspirations for security and dignity. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Por la convocatoria a este debate abierto, agradezco al coordinador especial Ramiz Alakbarov por su presentación y saludo a las delegaciones que participan en esta sesión. Al tomar la palabra por primera vez como miembro de este Consejo en una sesión dedicada a la cuestión de Palestina, Colombia reitera su solidaridad con el pueblo palestino y su compromiso con la realización de sus derechos inalienables, incluido el derecho a la autodeterminación. Señor presidente, han transcurrido más de 3 meses desde la puesta en marcha de la primera fase del Plan de Paz para Gaza. Mientras se anuncian discusiones sobre una segunda fase, persisten las violaciones reiteradas y cada vez más graves del cese al fuego, así como restricciones al acceso humanitario impuestas por Israel. Han sido 3 meses en los que los sobrevivientes del genocidio en Gaza han enfrentado la destrucción total de sus medios de vida, soportando las inclemencias del invierno, mientras la potencia ocupante mantiene cerrados los cruces, restringe de manera injustificada el ingreso de bienes esenciales para la supervivencia y arremete contra más de 37 organizaciones humanitarias que constituyen la única línea de vida para millones de palestinos. A lo anterior se suma el uso sistemático de la tortura, tratos crueles, inhumanos y degradantes, incluida la violencia sexual contra palestinos detenidos, entre ellos mujeres y niños. Estas prácticas, documentadas por mecanismos de las Naciones Unidas, se han intensificado en los últimos 2 años y se cometen en un contexto de casi total impunidad. El nivel de crueldad de estos hechos exige una condena clara y la rendición de cuentas inmediata. Mientras tanto, la campaña de desinformación contra el Organismo de Obras Públicas y Socorro de las Naciones Unidas para los Refugiados de Palestina en el cercano Oriente no cesa. A los gravísimos ataques, la demolición y destrucción deliberada de infraestructura de las Naciones Unidas en el complejo de UNRWA en Sheikh Jarrah, se suman decisiones adoptadas por el Knesset que contravienen de manera flagrante los privilegios e inmunidades de las Naciones Unidas y desconocen las obligaciones de Israel conforme al derecho internacional, como lo ha dejado claro la Corte Internacional de Justicia en su opinión consultiva del 22 de octubre de 2025. Señor presidente, No podemos perder de vista que la paz y la estabilidad solo pueden construirse sobre principios, sobre la justicia, la rendición de cuentas y el pleno reconocimiento del derecho inalienable del pueblo palestino a la autodeterminación. La única salida justa y sostenible es la solución biestatal y la construcción de un Estado palestino soberano, viable y contiguo dentro de las fronteras previas a 1967. En las actuales circunstancias, este Consejo debe ser absolutamente claro en lo siguiente. Primero, ninguna línea de armisticio puede interpretarse como una redefinición de fronteras internacionalmente reconocidas y la anexión de territorios, tanto en Gaza como en Cisjordania, es inadmisible. Segundo, el desplazamiento forzado de la población y la creación de guetos son inaceptables e incompatibles con el derecho internacional y la dignidad humana. Tercero, el respeto de los principios de neutralidad, independencia y humanidad en la entrega de ayuda humanitaria es innegociable y la ONU debe permanecer en el centro de la respuesta, inclusive a través de UNRWA. El acceso a servicios básicos como salud, educación y alimentos para la población palestina depende actualmente del trabajo de UNRWA y las ONG cuyo trabajo está siendo obstaculizado. Permítame, señor presidente, referirme ahora a la situación en Cisjordania, incluida Jerusalén Oriental, que no deja de ser cada vez más alarmante. En los últimos meses hemos sido testigos de una escalada sin precedentes en la violencia de los colonos, frecuentemente alentada por las propias autoridades israelíes y perpetrada con la aquiescencia o protección de las fuerzas de seguridad de la potencia ocupante. La expansión acelerada de los asentamientos, la aprobación de nuevas unidades por parte del Knesset, los ataques contra universidades e infraestructura civil, la asfixia deliberada de la economía palestina y los atentados cotidianos contra la vida y la propiedad de la población palestina no dejan duda sobre la existencia de una política sistemática orientada a hacer imposible la vida para los palestinos en toda Cisjordania. Esta dinámica de anexión de facto y de jure socava las posibilidades de la solución de dos estados. Señor presidente, la persistencia de la ocupación y la ausencia de una solución justa a la cuestión de Palestina continúan teniendo repercusiones directas sobre la estabilidad regional. Aunque los esfuerzos nacionales de Siria y Líbano son evidentes, estos se ven socavados por acciones que atentan contra su soberanía, independencia, unidad e integridad territorial. Este Consejo debe persistir en el acompañamiento a dichos esfuerzos nacionales, reiterando la urgencia de implementar de manera consistente y efectiva sus propias resoluciones, en particular las resoluciones 1559 y 1701. Antes de concluir, deseo subrayar un principio fundamental. El futuro de Palestina debe ser decidido por el pueblo de Palestina. No son aceptables nuevas formas de protectorado ni esquemas de administración externa que reproducen lógicas coloniales, ni en Palestina ni en ninguna otra parte del mundo. La autodeterminación es una piedra angular de esta organización y Colombia continuará defendiéndola. El Consejo de Seguridad tiene la responsabilidad primaria del mantenimiento de la paz y la seguridad internacionales y no puede ceder sus competencias a mecanismos opacos o parciales. Seguiremos de cerca los avances en la implementación de la segunda fase del plan de paz, de conformidad con lo autorizado por la resolución 2803. Hacemos un llamado a mantener este Consejo oportunamente informado y a incorporar plenamente las prioridades y necesidades del pueblo palestino. En nuestra responsabilidad como Estados miembros, garantizar que las Naciones Unidas sea parte integral de los esfuerzos para alcanzar una paz justa, sostenible y duradera en Palestina y en toda la región de Oriente Medio. Una paz basada en el respeto de la vida, el derecho internacional y la dignidad humana. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Somalia. Excellencies, it's my honor in my capacity as the President of the Security Council to convene this high-level quarterly open debate on the Middle East. I welcome Her Excellency Ms. Sarah Vaisolov Nayanti, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liberia, and His Excellency Mr. Georgios Geropetraitis, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece, to the meeting. I also want to thank Special Coordinator Alakbarov for his valuable briefings. We meet as the Middle East faces an overlapping political, security, humanitarian, and socio-economic crisis, challenges whose effects are felt far beyond the region. The common thread running through this crisis is the urgent need for a sustained international engagement, renewed trust in multilateral diplomacy, and unwavering commitment to the Charter of United Nations. Let me begin with Palestine, where the ongoing tragedy is in Gaza continues to shock the world's conscience. For years, civilians have endured relentless bombardment, mass displacement, and the collapse of essential services. The scale of destruction and catastrophic humanitarian conditions demand that this Council act with unity and resolve. Somalia stresses the international humanitarian law must be upheld fully without exception. The protection of civilians, humanitarian personnel, UN staff, and civilian infrastructure is a binding legal obligation. We reiterate the imperative of an immediate, comprehensive, and sustainable ceasefire and unhindered humanitarian access through multiple entry points. Just 2 days ago, the Council debated the rule of law among nations, a principle central to peace, security, and equality for all states. Yet, Israel has repeatedly violated these tenets without remorse or remedy. Its actions in Gaza, the West Bank, and beyond defy the international law, Security Council resolutions, and the most basic norms of the international system. This persistent impunity undermines not only justice in the Palestine, but also the credibility of this Council and the international order. Somalia is gravely concerned by Israel's escalating campaign against UNRWA, which remains vital for the survival and the dignity of millions of Palestinian refugees. UNRWA is not only a humanitarian actor, it's a lifeline delivering essential services to a population under occupation. Undermining UNRWA is a violation of humanitarian principles and abdication of Israel's responsibility as occupying power under the international law. Israel must ensure the welfare of Palestinian population, not obstruct or penalize those who provide critical support. We further condemn Israel's recent actions to recognize secessionist group in northwestern Somalia as an independent entity and reported plan to forcibly relocate Palestinians in the region in Somalia. Such actions are direct violation of Somali sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, and threatens the draw of Horn of Africa into the destabilized currents of the Middle East conflict. Attempts to impose new political realities on African continent set a dangerous precedent and erode the norms of international law and regional stability. The forced displacement of Palestinians from their homeland is unacceptable under international law. Any externally imposed scheme to relocate population or redraw borders will only deepen grievances, inflame tensions, and risk expanding the conflict. We are also deeply troubled by Israel's actions at the Holy Mosque in Jerusalem. Such provocations violate the sanctity of the world's most revered sites and threaten to ignite religious tensions across the region. Respect for religious sites is a fundamental obligation, and all parties must refrain from actions or rhetoric that endanger these sacred places and fragile coexistence they symbolize. The future of Gaza and the West Bank must be shaped by Palestinians themselves, restoring their political and territorial unity. Somalia reaffirms the two-state solution grounded in the relevant UN resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative and the New York Declaration remains the only credible framework for peace, justice, and security for Palestinians and Israelis. Turning to Lebanon, the situation along the Blue Line remains deeply concerning. Israel's violation of 1701 are a serious concern and cross-border exchange and a constant risk of miscalculation threaten to drag the region into wider conflict. Somalia emphasizes the UNIFIL safety and freedom of movement must be respected at all times. The stability, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Lebanon are essential for regional equilibrium. In Syria, the consequences of conflict remain acute. The country faces political stagnation, humanitarian distress, and ongoing instability. Any unilateral measures or externally driven arrangement risk undermining Syria's unity and sovereignty, and humanitarian access must be safe, principled, and predictable. Resolution 2254 remains the internationally international agreed framework for the lasting settlement. We urge renewed commitment to Syrian-owned process that advance national reconciliation and safe voluntary return of the refugees. Repeated Israeli strikes inside Syria, which escalate tensions, must cease in line with international law. In Yemen, the reopening of Aden Airport, stabilization in parts of the south have improved access, but shifting control and continued detention of UN and humanitarian staff in the north are unacceptable and must end. Chronic underfunding threats, life-saving operations, Yemen's path to peace requires Yemeni-owned process grounded in established references. Stability comes when all parties honor their commitment and ensure weapons remain under state control. We reject against any attack on Yemeni sovereignty, territorial integrity, national unity, and independence. Regional dynamics involving Iran remain worrisome. Rising tensions across the maritime area, the land domains risk miscalculation and expanding conflict. Somalia underscores the urgent need for restraint, de-escalation, and respect for sovereignty. A structured regional dialogue grounded in non-interference and mutual respect is essential to stability. Across all these crises, one truth stands out. The Middle East challenges are deeply interconnected, and the common denominator is clear. Lasting peace and stability can only be achieved when all parties respect international law, uphold the responsibility, and embrace dialogue over confrontation. Fragmented responses will not yield sustainable solutions. Somalia urges coherent, principled engagement from this Council and renewed investment in political processes that put the aspirations and the dignity of the region's people at their core. In that context, The late US President Jimmy Carter's commitment to peace shaped the region, notably through the Camp David Accords, and a breakthrough that proved dialogue and respect for agreement can replace conflict. I close excerpts from his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. I quote, "The bottom line is this: peace will come to Israel and to the Middle East only when Israeli government is willing to comply with international law, with a roadmap of peace, with official American policy, with wishes of the majority of its own citizens, and honor the previous commitments by accepting its legal borders." End of quote. And now resume my function as the President of the Council. I wish to remind all speakers to limit their statements to no more than 3 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 3 minutes. I now give the floor the representative of Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أتقدم إليكم بالشكر على عقد هذه الجلسة، وإلى النائب المنسق الأممي الخاص لعملية السلام السيد رامز أكبروف على إحاطته القيمة، كما وأرحب بمشاركة معالي وزيرة خارجية ليبيريا ومعالي وزير خارجية اليونان معنا في هذه الجلسة. ويشرفني أن أدلي بهذا البيان باسم المجموعة العربية. نجتمع اليوم في لحظة مفصلية بعد أكثر من عامين من الحرب التي شنتها إسرائيل على قطاع غزة، وتؤكد فيها المجموعة العربية على أهمية التزام إسرائيل باتفاق وقف إطلاق النار فيها الذي تم التوصل إليه في تشرين الأول 2025 بجهود أمريكية، والكف عن انتهاكاتها له، وتطالب بتنفيذ اتفاق وقف إطلاق النار بجميع مراحله وبنوده. وبهذا الصدد تثمن المجموعة العربية الدور الذي اطلع به فخامة الرئيس الأمريكي في التوصل إلى اتفاق وقف إطلاق النار، والجهود الحثيثة التي بذلتها كل من جمهورية مصر العربية ودولة قطر وجمهورية تركيا في إنجازه. ونؤكد على أهمية بدء المرحلة الثانية منه وصولا إلى تطبيق خطة الرئيس ترامب الشاملة وقرار مجلس الأمن رقم 2803 بالكامل. ونشدد على أهمية إطلاق جهود التعافي المبكر وإعادة الإعمار في جميع أنحاء غزة، وأن مستقبل قطاع غزة يجب أن يستند على وحدته وارتباطه مع الضفة الغربية وبها، وأن تتولى السلطة الوطنية الفلسطينية صاحبة الولاية مقاليد الحكم في القطاع وضمان وحدته مع الضفة الغربية بما في ذلك القدس الشرقية، وضمان ممارسة الشعب الفلسطيني حقه في تقرير المصير واستقلال دولته. تدين المجموعة العربية كافة الإجراءات الإسرائيلية العسكرية والسياسية والتشريعية والمالية الرامية لتقويض السلطة الفلسطينية، وتطالب المجتمع الدولي بالتصدي لها. السيد الرئيس، إن تشكيل مجلس السلام واللجنة الوطنية الفلسطينية لإدارة قطاع غزة بوصفهما هيئتان انتقاليتان مؤقتتان منشئتا عملا بقرار مجلس الأمن رقم 2803 يجب أن يؤدي إلى تثبيت الوقف الدائم لإطلاق النار ومنع التهجير والضم وانسحاب إسرائيل الكامل من القطاع ودعم إعادة إعمار غزة والدفع نحو أفق سياسي حقيقي يفضي إلى استقلال الدولة الفلسطينية ذات السيادة على خطوة الرابع من حزيران 1967 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وتحقيق السلام العادل والشامل وفقا لقرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبادرة السلام العربية وعلى أساس حل الدولتين. كما تشدد المجموعة على ضرورة إلزام إسرائيل القوى القائمة بالاحتلال برفع جميع القيود والعوائق أمام إدخال المساعدات الإنسانية وفتح جميع المعابر دون انتقائية أو تأخير بما يضمن وصولها إلى جميع أنحاء القطاع امتثالا لالتزاماتها بموجب القانون الدولي وقرارات مجلس الأمداد الصلة. السيد الرئيس، تجدد المجموعة العربية إدانتها لجميع السياسات والممارسات الإسرائيلية غير القانونية في الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة بما في ذلك في الضفة الغربية، باستمرار التوسع في الاستيطان وهدم المنازل ومصادرة الأراضي واستمرار إرهاب المستوطنين. ونشدد على أن لا سيادة لإسرائيل على الضفة الغربية المحتلة أو أي جزء من الأرض الفلسطينية. وبهذا الصدد تثمن المجموعة تأكيد فخامة الرئيس الأمريكي منع إسرائيل ضم الضفة الغربية. السيد الرئيس، ترحب المجموعة باعتماد الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة قرارها المؤيد لإعلان نيويورك بشأن استقلال الدولة الفلسطينية وتنفيذ حل الدولتين، الصادر عن المؤتمر الدولي حول التسوية السلمية للقضية الفلسطينية وتنفيذ حل الدولتين الذي ترأسته المملكة العربية السعودية والجمهورية الفرنسية. كما تشدد المجموعة على أن القدس الشرقية هي جزء لا يتجزأ من الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة، وأن لا سيادة لإسرائيل عليها، وعلى ضرورة احترام إسرائيل الوضع التاريخي والقانوني القائم للمقدسات الإسلامية والمسيحية فيها. ونؤكد أن إدارة أوقاف القدس وشؤون المسجد الأقصى المبارك التابعة لوزارة الأوقاف والشؤون والمقدسات الإسلامية الأردنية هي الجهة القانونية صاحبة الاختصاص الحصري بإدارة شؤون الحرم القدسي الشريف كافة وتنظيم الدخول إليه في إطار الوصاية الهاشمية التاريخية على المقدسات الإسلامية والمسيحية في القدس الشريف. كما تؤكد المجموعة على أهمية دور لجنة القدس ووكالة بيت مال القدس الشريف الذراع التنفيذي للجنة ودعم كل ما تقوم به اللجنة من جهود. السيد الرئيس، تشدد المجموعة العربية أيضا على أهمية دور وكالة الأنروا الذي لا غنى عنه في تقديم الخدمات الحيوية لأكثر من 5.5 مليون لاجئ في جميع مناطق عملها وفقا لتفويضها الأممي. وفي هذا السياق نعيد التذكير بالرأي الاستشاري لمحكمة العدل الدولية الصادر في تشرين الأول 25 الذي أكد أن إسرائيل ملزمة بأن تضمن الاحترام التام لحرمة مقرات الأمم المتحدة وحصانتها بما في ذلك وكالة الأنروا. ومن هذا المنطلق تدعو المجموعة مجلس الأمن والمجتمع الدولي إلى تحمل مسؤولياته القانونية والتصدي للقرارات والخروقات الإسرائيلية المدانة التي تستهدف الأنروا، وآخرها تهديم مباني داخل مجمع الأنروا في حي الشيخ جراح في القدس الشرقية. كما وتجدد دعوتها للمجتمع الدولي لتوفير الدعم السياسي والمالي للوكالة للتمكن من الاطلاع بدورها الذي لا غنى عنه. وتدين المجموعة الإجراءات التعسفية الإسرائيلية ضد مؤسسات المجتمع المدني والمؤسسات الإنسانية العاملة في الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة وتطالب بوضع حد لها. سيد الرئيس، فيما يخص سوريا، تدين المجموعة جميع الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية على سوريا والتوغل داخل أراضيها والذي يعد خرقا فاضحا للقانون الدولي وعدوانا على سيادة سوريا وتصعيدا خطيرا يزيد من التوتر والصراع. وتطالب المجتمع الدولي ومجلس الأمن بالتحرك الفوري لتطبيق القانون الدولي وإلزام إسرائيل بوقف عدوانها والانسحاب من الأراضي السورية التي تتواجد فيها في خرق واضح لاتفاق فض الاشتباك لعام 74. وتعيد المجموعة التأكيد أن الجولان السوري هو أرض سورية محتلة وترفض قرار إسرائيل ضمه وفرض سيادتها عليه. أما فيما يخص لبنان، ترحب المجموعة العربية بجهود الحكومة اللبنانية بإعلان الجيش اللبناني الانتهاء من تنفيذ المرحلة الأولى من خطة حصر السلاح التي تواكب عزم الدولة اللبنانية بسط سيطرتها على كامل الأراضيها وبقوتها الذاتية، وتتطلع لانعقاد المؤتمر الدولي لدعم الجيش اللبناني وقوى الأمن الداخلي في 5 آذار المقبل الذي تستضيفه فرنسا بمسعى مشكور من السعودية وقطر ومصر وفرنسا والولايات المتحدة. وتدين المجموعة الانتهاكات الإسرائيلية اليومية لسيادة لبنان وللقرار 1701 بما في ذلك استمرار احتلالها ل5 مواقع حدودية في جنوب لبنان وإنشاء ما يسمى بالمناطق العازلة داخل الأراضي اللبنانية. وتدعو مجلس الأمن إلى تحمل مسؤولياته وإجبار إسرائيل على وقف اعتداءاتها والانسحاب من جميع الأراضي اللبنانية المحتلة فورا وإطلاق سراح جميع الأسرى اللبنانيين. ختاما سيد الرئيس، المجموعة العربية تجدد تأكيدها على أن السلام العادل والشامل والدائم هو خيار عربي استراتيجي، ويظل السبيل الوحيد لتحقيق هذا السلام هو قيام الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة ذات السيادة على خطوط الرابع من حزيران 67 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية المحتلة وفقا للمرجعيات المعتمدة مبادرة السلام العربية وقرارات الشرعية الدولية ذات الصلة. شكرا سيدي الكريم.
The representative of Hashemite Kingdoms of Jordan for his statement, and now give the floor the representative of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since 1947, the question of Palestine has remained on the United Nations agenda, making it the longest-running issue before this organization. It is not merely a territorial dispute, but a defining political and moral issue whose resolution remains essential to peace and stability in the Middle East. The Philippines welcomes the cessation of hostilities in Gaza and the progress achieved under the comprehensive plan endorsed by the Security Council in Resolution 2803. After 2 years of devastating conflict and immense civilian suffering, the ceasefire offers an opportunity to stabilize a situation that has long threatened international peace and security. At the same time, the ceasefire remains fragile, making immediate and sustained Council attention to the implementation of the Gaza peace plan as essential. In this regard, the Philippines wishes to underscore the following. First, humanitarian conditions in Gaza remain critical. While access has marginally improved, civilians continue to face severe food insecurity, widespread displacement, and the collapse of essential services, further aggravated by winter conditions. Free, safe, and unimpeded humanitarian access must be ensured without delay. In this connection, due to recent developments in East Jerusalem, we are deeply concerned over the ability of the United Nations to provide the necessary humanitarian assistance so urgently needed by the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. Secondly, the Philippines welcomes the UN Security Council Resolution 2803 on the implementation of the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict. We note that the resolution calls upon member states and international organizations to work with the Board of Peace to identify opportunities to support the reconstruction of Gaza, and for the World Bank and other financial institutions to facilitate and provide financial resources to support the reconstruction and development of Gaza, including through the establishment of a dedicated trust fund. Thirdly, stabilization and reconstruction should lead to a long-term and credible political horizon. The Philippines thus reaffirms its support for the two-state solution as the only viable and lasting path to peace. We support renewed diplomatic efforts, including the New York Declaration and the Global Alliance to advance lasting peace in the Middle East. Mr. President, as a committed partner, pathfinder, and peacemaker, the Philippines stands ready to work with the Council and other members of the international community to work towards a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Philippines, and I now give the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this meeting. And we also thank all briefers for the valuable briefing. Indonesia aligns ourselves with the statements to be delivered on behalf of the OIC, the Non-Aligned Movement, the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, and the core group of the Shared Commitment of UNRWA. In my national capacity, allow me to make the following statement. Indonesia reiterates our unwavering commitment to a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in the Middle East, with a peaceful resolution of the question of Palestine at the center. While collective support for the peaceful resolution continues to grow, the reality on the ground stands in painful contrast. We deplore ongoing violence in Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, that undermines prospect for peace. We all understand that violence will only beget more violence. It is therefore our collective duty to take decisive action to end this catastrophe, ensuring the two states can live side by side in peace and security within their own sovereign and independent territories in accordance with internationally agreed parameters and relevant UN resolutions. To this end, Indonesia underscores three urgent priorities. First, any peace plan should aim towards a peaceful, just, and lasting solution. The effectiveness of the second phase of the comprehensive peace plan must be ensured to bring humanitarian assistance on the ground. Indonesia welcomes the establishment of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, and our decision to join the Board of Peace with other countries of the Group of 8 is based on our clear commitment to preserving the two-state solution and continue to be guided by Security Council Resolution 2803. This led me to my second point, preserving the centrality of the Security Council. As the custodian of international peace and security, the responsibility to advance and safeguard an effective peace process remains with this Council. The Council must remain seized to ensure that all efforts and processes remain anchored in UN Charter and international law. This requires the Council to exert its leadership through consistent monitoring for compliance and ensuring UN agencies and UN-led humanitarian efforts serve as an integral part of the peace process. Third, protection of civilians, cessation of violence, and unimpeded humanitarian access are prerequisites for credible political horizons. These are not optional, these are legal obligations. We are therefore gravely concerned on the continued attacks on UNRWA, a blatant violation of international law, including the Convention of Privileges and Immunities of the UN and the ICJ advisory opinion in October 2025, which will deprive millions of civilians of much-needed life-saving assistance. This Council must be able to move beyond condemnation and rise to its responsibilities to halt all violence and violations of international law, to bring a genuine political momentum and create a just and lasting peace. Mr. President, Indonesia continues to reaffirm our principal position that the entire peace process must lead to end illegal occupation of the Palestinian territory and achieving the two-state solution. This is key to lasting peace in the Middle East. The international community must act with unity, resolve, and moral clarity to ensure that peace, justice, dignity, and humanity prevail. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Indonesia for his statement. There is still a number of speakers remaining on the list for this meeting. I intend, with the concurrence of the members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until 3 p.m. today. The meeting is suspended.